Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Thursday, August 14th, 2014. My name is Joe Hagmann, along with my co-host and father, Doug Hagmann, who will be joining me shortly as soon as he learns how to use a phone. We have a great show lined up for you tonight. Nathan Leal will be joining us about 30 minutes into this hour, and he will stay with us through the next 2.5 hours. In the half hour we have a lot of news and information to get into, and I'm going to wait till my father jumps on board here. All right, and he's getting cued in here. There we go. Good evening.
That's fantastic how this works. I have to tell you this, just mere seconds before I was going to do the introduction, I was unceremoniously cut off. But, folks, we have a lot of information here to pass along to you. Last night's show was a great show. Today it's going to be a great show. Nathan Leal will be on with us. Of course, you can visit his website at thewatchmanscry.com, and he's going to be talking about the real. His message is going to be a continuation of his last broadcast, but a lot of symbolism, a lot of stuff going on here that he'll be getting into. But got a lot of great emails about last night, got a lot of great comments about last night's program. I do want to say that one woman here, Barbara from Canada, wants to know something here, and I'll just touch on this real quick. This is an email directed to all of us last night, but she wants to know. She says, I listen to every chance I get. Usually in the morning after your broadcast. There's a lot of pressure to hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, mounting all around us. What is really meant, she writes, is to acknowledge no evil. And isn't that the truth? And as we talked about last night, the church seems to want to do just the happy dance, as she calls it. And she writes that she remembers thinking years ago that people like Chuck Missler and others were exaggerating when he said the true church in America would have to go underground. And we're seeing it happen today. A lot of people without us, she writes, would be lonely out there. And she said, I'm wondering if sometime when Steve and Pastor Langford are on, if you could explore the phenomena of men professing to be Christians who seem to have abdicated leadership in their homes and in their communities. They've basically curled up into a spiritual ball. They don't want to wake up. And is this a real expression of men's hearts will fail them? She writes that she'd love to hear our take on it. And I got to give you my take on this a little bit, at least how I feel about it. I do think that there's a tendency to downplay what's really taking place, tremendously downplay what's taking place, and to say everything is just fine, not to worry about everything, because that's the easiest thing to do. Let's say right now, that's the absolute easiest thing to do. And if you can still go out and buy your Starbucks or buy your Tim Hortons here in the Northeast, or if you can still go out to the mall and shop at the mall, everything is fine, right? If you can still get gas and put gas in your car and get your whatever. Yeah, I mean, everything is fine. So you're just being some sort of conspiratorial idiot, basically, by saying that things are going backwards, or that things are going on and we can't see them. And I personally believe, and in fact, Alan West, I said an article today that Alan West declares Obama an Islamist, and I believe that it's almost like welcome to the party. Okay, of course he's more than that. Not to frag Alan West, to frag our own people on our side, but I think people now are starting to become a little bit more vocal. We were saying this 8 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Of course he's an Islamist. Of course. And it's almost as if people are not understanding the severity of what's going on. So if you're feeling that way, don't feel alone. Just don't feel alone.
There's a lot of speculation about what the renegade in chief is up to on vacation at Martha's Vineyard, doing his presidential duty, playing golf a lot here. And there's a couple different theories. He's coming back this weekend. And there's an article from The Hill. Why is Obama returning to Washington? President Obama won't make any major announcements on immigration reform during his secretive mid-vacation trip back to Washington next week, the White House said Wednesday. The president is expected to return to the White House on Sunday, but officials won't say why Obama is taking the unusual, costly trip back to Washington, after which he will go back to his vacation at Martha's Vineyard. I've seen and gotten information that he could be writing a series of executive orders pertaining to illegal immigration, an amnesty up to 5 million illegals could be legalized. I've seen it could be an announcement on Ebola. And I've heard many other theories and rumors about his return on Sunday from vacation. And Dad, I don't know if you've heard anything, but I saw this article today.
Yes.
Putin.
Rumors.
Okay. Putin says the petrodollar must die. The dollar monopoly in energy trade is damaging Russia's economy. Did you see this?
Yes, I did.
Well, we talk about this constantly, and I don't know if you've heard back from V, if we have any plans of when he'll be on next, but this article goes on to state, on one hand, despite initial weaknesses following Europe's triple-digit red alert, futures declined only to surge higher after some headline or another out of Russia was again spun to suggest imminent Ukraine de-escalation. It goes on to say, perpetuating a rumor which was set off by a Russian media outlet tweet last week that has sent the S&P futures over 50 higher than less a week on nothing. On the other side, Putin just said the following, which no matter how one spins it, it shows precisely how Russia has inclined vice versa for future escalations. Putin says Russia should aim to sell oil and gas for rubles globally, as the dollar monopoly in energy trade.
All right, what have we been talking about? What have we? Sorry to cut you off, but what have we been talking about for the better part of 2 years? The fact that we are engaged in a proxy war with Russia, and of course, the asymmetrical warfare here. At the very, 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 very top, we know that Obama, Putin, they're all controlled by the same group of individuals. However, it's kind of like the sports teams. I'm trying to appeal to the sports enthusiasts out there. You're rooting for the Dallas Cowboys, you're rooting for the Chiefs, whatever. It doesn't matter. And you think, oh, that's it. The Chiefs are my team. Oh, the Cowboys are my team. All the stats, got them all down, right? Well, hey, guess what? How would you feel if I said, look, every team is owned by the same group of families, group of individuals? Well, that's okay. It don't matter to me. Well, look, that's the way it is here. But see, we're engaged in a proxy war with Russia and the United States. That's through Syria, and we're doing the bidding for Saudi Arabia. But the fact is, the asymmetrical warfare calls for Russia to take out the U.S. dollar. Of course, we are going to take it out. Kyle Bass, don't forget, interviewed Timothy Geithner. We believe it was Timothy Geithner back a couple of years ago about killing the dollar. The dollar, that's the target. Now people are saying, well, there's a big push to keep the dollar afloat. Well, that's true because there's a controlled collapse. You see, where people are being confused, there's a controlled collapse of the U.S. dollar, of course. a non-controlled collapse of the dollar. They want the controlled collapse of the dollar. They're gonna get as many people into the dollar as possible, and then of course at that time pull the plug once they can rape, pillage, plunder as many people as possible. Then they're going to pull the plug on the U.S. dollar, but not before, not 1 second before, because this is a game, and to them anyway. And that's what that's all about. Yes, of course. Don't forget what the United States did to the Soviet Union back in the Cold War, at the end of the Cold War, when we went after the ruble. Well, what do you think? What do you think Putin was during that time? He's part of the KGB. You think he's taking a page out of our playbook, doing the same thing to us, just so you know what's going on. It's people will say, well, everything is fine, the economy's fine, the unemployment's, it's up a little bit, or this or that. Are you serious? The Dow's up. Really? Okay. That's what you're thinking. Home starts are up, so we're looking at a potential recovery. Oh, come on. I mean, if you're that far gone, put your faith into the stock market. If you're that far gone, put your faith into these other matters, then go watch cartoons. I'm done.
All right. Well, people have seen what's been going on in Ferguson, Missouri, as the protests have turned peaceful. They went from rioting and looting to peaceful protests in the last few nights, and there are several videos and articles about different news personalities being detained by police officers, rubber bullets and tear gas being shot on peaceful protesters. And this from the Washington Post today. The Pentagon gave nearly $500 million of military gear to local law enforcement last year. And it says the events in Ferguson, Missouri this week are an uncomfortable reminder of the militarization of America's police and small-town law enforcement agencies. The photos coming out of the town of heavily armed officers in full combat gear squeezing off against unarmed protesters look like images we're used to seeing from Gaza, Turkey, Egypt, but not from a Midwestern suburb of 21,000 people. One of the ways police departments have armed themselves in recent years is through the Defense Department's excess property program, known as the 1033 program. We've talked about this in shows past, this specific program. It goes on to state it permits the Secretary of Defense to transfer without charge excess U.S. Department of Defense personnel property, supplies, and equipment to state and local law enforcement agencies. And we are seeing this today being rolled out and used in Ferguson as 2 Department of Justice protest marshals have rolled into town to help train people in part in demonstrations in what they're demonstrating over the fatal shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. According to Ferguson Mayor James Knowles, who spoke with the Daily Caller Wednesday, this town of about 20,000 just north of St. Louis has become a flashpoint of strife after the Ferguson officer shot Brown in an altercation Saturday. It goes on to state the Department of Justice has sent 2 protest marshals into town. 2 protest marshals. 2 Department of Justice employees are working for Community Relations Service Divisions, are on ground working with these local groups. The federal agents are conducting training for the group's best practices for participating in protests. The goal is to help them become more constructive, the report says. Now, this is crazy as we see what has happened in what I said here in the open, that the violence has went from looting and rioting to something different. We're seeing peaceful protesters, as I said, being shot at with rubber bullets and tear gas. We're seeing news personnel having direct altercations with the police, just like in Occupy Wall Street. We're seeing them being detained and arrested, as well as other civilians and protesters that are there. But there are some disturbing videos circulating on the internet about the use of force in this Ferguson. And it's not slowing down, it's escalating. There are social media threats and other protests in other towns popping up all over the place. And to see that the Department of Justice is sending personnel in there to help with these protests. They've turned the security over to the Missouri State Police and have pulled out the local law enforcement agencies there. This could take, even worse turn before it gets better, and not just in this local area.
I'm going to tell you right now, Chuck Baldwin wrote an article stated today, and it's archived. I believe it's on Chuck Baldwin Live. It's on his own website. Now, I just want to kind of cite from his article. It's called Police Abuse Riots in AR-15 Rifles. Now, this is by Chuck Baldwin. Folks, if you haven't seen this, if you haven't read this, do read this, okay? I'm just going to paraphrase from it. The emphasis is mine, not his. If you don't, referencing an AR-15 or a 223 or a 308 type rifle with semi-automatic, Okay, here I go again. If you don't have a 223 or a 308 semi-automatic rifle, certainly get one. Get one now. Because he writes that the recent killing of an unarmed teenager by a Ferguson, Missouri police officer incited riots in and around the northern St. Louis area. Now, you got to know the demographics of St. Louis, but I'm not going to get into that. That's me, not him. As usual, the police version and the version of several eyewitnesses, and the witnesses lie in stark contrast. Of course they do. They're always going to. That's an age-old problem that we've had. The police version is, according to Baldwin, the young man was struggling with the officer and trying to take his weapon from him, and the officer fired his weapon in self-defense. Several eyewitnesses, however, say the young man had his hands in the air as if he was going to surrender. That's my saying, when the cop just shot him. The latter version is more popular. It was a more popular view of the local residents, which prompted hundreds of people to riot. Now, yes, the victim was a young black man. And he writes, it's very unfortunate and counterproductive when race becomes the focus of any story such as this, but it almost always does. Our propaganda media, I love it, which loves to use of the race card, almost always makes any such tragedy some kind of racial discrimination story. That's very true. And sometimes it is. Now, but more often than not, race has nothing to do with it. Okay, now it's very unfortunate that among the vast majority of God-fearing law and order Americans, policemen are automatically assumed to be guiltless in the face of accusations of police abuse. Don't you find that? In fact, if you've ever served on a jury, you're asked the question that, are you more likely to believe a police officer over a defendant? And believe me, you're automatically going to say, oh, yeah, yep, you betcha. It's almost as if when a guy puts on a badge or a woman puts on a badge and a gun, he or she becomes incapable of human misconduct. Now, as Baldwin writes, am I suggesting that the majority of police killings are unjustified? I am not. I still believe that the vast majority of our men and women in blue, brown for sheriff's deputies, of course, are sincere, law-abiding people who have a tough job, that they do outstandingly well. The vast majority, but not all, certainly not all. And he writes that, sadly, incidents of police abuse seem to be skyrocketing. Now, I agree with him. I agree with him on this, okay? Examples of police arrogance and overreach are ubiquitous. Absolutely they are. More and more law enforcement personnel have us versus them mentality. Absolutely they do. And then, and the them, by the way, are us. It's me now. Okay, more and more policemen have a shoot first and ask question later mindset, and more look upon their fellow citizens as the enemy. And this is a true story he points out in this. There was a Christian policeman who was recently asked to speak at a church gathering. Now think about this, folks. The officer works in the traffic division of a small town. I don't know how many small towns have traffic divisions, but we'll just take it at Take it as such. Mostly he gives out parking and speeding tickets. As he opened his address to his fellow churchmen, he said, I'm a cop. I work among the dregs of society. Oh, really? People who get parking tickets or drive a little over the speed limit are the dregs of society? Baldwin writes that statement alone should have disqualified everything that this officer had to say after that, but sadly the vast majority of Christians in the audience thundered their approval and with choruses of amen and applause and what have you, and that illustrates the depth of the problem we are facing. Putting on a badge and a gun makes a man no more righteous than putting on an apron or a fire suit or a clergyman's frock or a helmet of a welder or a lab coat or anything else. If anything, putting a badge and a gun on makes a man more accountable or a woman more accountable for their actions than any other profession. So what Joe was saying, too, before you get into that, the incident in Missouri obviously still being investigated. There are plenty of examples of police conduct that is either questionable or downright Gestapo-like. And there are many, many, many examples of that. But the New York and Missouri incidents, especially after the Missouri incidents, the U.S. Justice Department has announced that it is widening its involvement in local policing in an attempt to curb the growing abuse of power. And he writes, and I echo, are you kidding me? The reason that so many of our local and state police agencies are succumbing to increased examples of police abuse is directly due to the militarization of local and state police agencies by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. For crying out loud, folks, I mean, really? The DHS is providing the funding, the armaments, the military-style vehicles, the weaponry, the tactics, the training for the state, local, municipal police agencies, the arrogance, the heavy-handedness, the tactics of these rogue police officers can be traced right back to the influence of the U.S. government's Department of Homeland Security. You talk about a rogue agency, DHS is a rogue agency created by the Gestapo-minded bureaucrats from Bush on down and right through present day. This is the same U.S. government that's going to widen its involvement with local police agencies in order to curb violence. Are you serious? Are you out of your flipping mind? Really? That's going to help it, right? The U.S. Department of Justice is widening its involvement. Yeah. What a great idea. That's like having the IRS help you do your taxes. Yeah, I'll help you.
Yeah. That's a good one. And it is like that. And it's just crazy. I was just reading some of the statistics. I know we went over that Pentagon 1033 program last year, but again, this year, even more machinery, as you said, 400 MRAPs, 500 aircraft, 93,000 machine guns have been given to local police forces. And I heard from an older documentary about Rodney King I watched today how we see these uprisings from against local police forces when shootings or whatever event happens that brings these in. And we have calls now from the Senator, John Lewis. He's calling for martial law to be declared in Ferguson, Missouri, for the federal police to come in and protect the citizens against the local police. This would be bad, obviously. As federal police are going to do nothing but, a national police force, we talk about this a lot, like the Department of Homeland Security, where local police forces do try their best to keep enforcing the laws of the land, the Constitution, and keeping peace. A national police force would be of a different agenda, keeping the government and their elitist and goals as what to protect instead of the people and the Constitution, which is what local police forces do now, or what they appear to do now, or are supposed to do now. But we see this, and Rand Paul has come out and made a statement against demilitarizing the police. And he said, we must demilitarize the police. Anyone who thinks race does not stew the application of criminal justice in this country is not paying close enough attention. Senator Rand Paul writes for Time amid violence in Ferguson, Missouri over the police shooting death of an 18-year-old. And he goes on to state, soldiers and police are supposed to be different. Police look inward. They're supposed to protect their fellow citizens from criminals and maintain order with a minimum force. It's the difference between Audie Murphy and Andy Griffith. But nowadays the police are looking and acting more like soldiers than cops with bad consequences. And those who suffer the consequences are usually innocent civilians. Why armored vehicles in a Midwestern inner suburb? Why would cops wear camouflage against a terrain pattern by convenience stores and beauty parlors? Why are the authorities in Ferguson so given to quasi-martial crowd control methods, such as bans on walking the street, sound weapons? It goes on to say, why would someone identify themselves as an 82nd Airborne Army veteran observing the Ferguson police scene? It goes on to say this is a visual aspect of the story. There has been a overpowering of police forces confronting unarmed protesters who are seen waving signs or hands. Most of the police officers are good cops and good people. It is unquestionably a difficult job, especially in the current circumstances, but there is a systematic problem with today's law enforcement. Just as government is turning big, and as big government is the heart of the problem in Washington, any type of, turning towards as I said, the national or federal mama and papa bear, as one would say, or the federal dole, turning towards them for solutions, and these are my words, is the problem here. Because you don't just get their help with equipment or different little things. You get more than that. You get their agenda, their personnel, their artillery, and so on and so on. And people have to realize that there is a time coming in this country where, if we can't peacefully resolve between citizens and authorities how to move past a shooting or hold these people accountable. Now, the police force in Ferguson haven't done what they said they were going to do by releasing the name of the cop and the details of the shooting, and they've done some things to stoke up the crowd even more. And we see that, as you said, the DOJ is getting involved. It's just crazy.
Let me give you my take on Ferguson. Ferguson is right now, if not a beta test, it is actually being used to really begin the actual racial riots. The Summer of Rage. Remember the Summer of Rage back in the 60s? What was the 68, 67, 68? Remember the burning of various cities. Cleveland, Ohio burned. My goodness, Los Angeles. It was crazy. Now, what I see taking place right now, if you look at the behavior of the Ferguson Police Department, they're backing away. They're allowing the looting. There's a provocation there by sight. There's a visual provocation. If you watch you won't find this on the mainstream media, but if you watch what's going on with the Ferguson Police Department, they're backing off, allowing things to take place. They are enforcing nothing. They are actually cultivating an environment that will allow, or that is allowing, this racial strife to grow stronger. Now, why in the world would that be? Well, I think the answer lies in Baldwin's reference to the fact that the DOJ is involved. I believe, it is my honest belief, based on my analysis as a career investigator, looking at the human behavior, that the Department of Justice, that the Obama the renegade in chief, I'm glad I didn't break my own rule. I mean, we don't have too many rules in this radio program. Of course, no cussing. That's sometimes that's red buttons far away when that happens. Google is not a verb, and what was the other rule I was going for here in this case, Joe? You could read my mind. Anyway.
I don't know. I don't follow the rules.
Yeah, well, anyway. But the fact is this. Look, if you watch what's going on with the Ferguson Police Department, you're watching the militarization of the police department. Oh, Obama. The other rule is Obama is not. It's not the Obama administration. He's just the renegade in chief. Renegade reference to a Secret Service code name. And thank you very much. But anyway, so watch what they're doing. Watch the DOJ's involvement. They are trying to recreate the Summer of Rage. It's not going too well, and that's why, of course, you've got the DOJ involvement. Well, why would they want to do this? Combine this with the open borders. The southern borders are wide open, and when Nathan comes on, Joe, this is the other thing. We did not script this tightly tonight because Nathan's going to be on. But when he comes on, before he talks, I do have something I want to approach him with. Okay? And this, folks, if you want to be prepared for this is in advance of Nathan, but while he's on, because I want to get his take on this. And I want to do this verbally as opposed to an article. Folks, if you go to CanadaFreePress.com, look at the top column. And now we're going to venture into Nathan Leal's department here. The column by Eileen Johnson-Powell. It has to do with Ebola. National preparedness for potential Ebola outbreak and what the public's told. You might say, well, what in the world? You were just talking about Ferguson, the riots there. What are you changing subjects? What are you, ADD? I mean, come on. No. Because I think this is all related. Remember, it's chaos. Satan is Captain Chaos. Oh, well, no. That's I shouldn't say that. Obama is Captain Chaos. Satan is the father of lies. I don't want to minimize Satan's involvement in this or the devil's involvement. But I will say that these two are highly related, directly related. You've got the poor southern border. You've got the balkanization, which is the larger objective of everyone says, well, the southern border is open, so more Democratic voters. Yeah, spoken like a true Republican, right? Yeah, more Democratic voters. Oh, she can do that with a flip of a switch. Really? I mean, okay, so maybe that's part of it, but if that's your biggest, strongest talking point, well, you're not seeing the big picture. But Ferguson, this is in my view, this is all part of a larger summer of rage, in a continual rage agenda and chaos agenda. The militarization, they've got to militarize, or they've got to make use of the militarized police forces, whether it's Ferguson or whether it's Watts or whether it's Mayfield Heights or who, the 5 boroughs in New York City or Miami-Dade. It doesn't matter. They've got to utilize these weapons of war domestically. And that's what they're going after, because they need to occupy us, preoccupy us, and occupy us. So, remind me before Nathan comes on, or when Nathan comes on, Joe, I do want to get into something. Folks, you can get a jump on this by going to CanadaFreePress.com. Dr. Eileen Johnson-Powell, disconnect national preparedness for potential Ebola outbreak and what the public is told. This I believe, has something directly to do with Nathan Leal's analyses, plural, to date. Pretty interesting, huh?
And Nathan should be joining us any time now. But until he does join us, one more piece of news I wanted to hit on from yesterday. The United Nations, we all know the ceasefire and what's been going on with Israel and Gaza, but the United Nations appointed an anti-Israeli lecturer to investigate Israeli war crimes in Gaza. Appointment a complete travesty of justice. The appointment by the United Nations of an outspoken critic of Israel to head a commission investigating alleged Israeli war crimes in Gaza has been termed a complete travesty of justice by Israel's ambassador to the UN. Ambassador Ron Prosser was protesting the appointment of William Shabazz, a Canadian jurist and lecturer on international law, to the post. In a letter to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Prosser said, "In the light of the hate-fueled rants, one does not need to be a fortune teller to predict the outcome of this inquiry." In a tape shown on Israeli Channel 2 last night, Shabazz is telling colleagues last year that the person he would most like to see tried by the International Court of Justice was Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He also suggested that the then Israeli President Shimon Peres be tried, and it goes on from there, this article goes on detailing the anti-Israel sentiment this appointee has been given throughout the last few years, but now they're saying that this he's denying that he is anti-Israeli, and nothing is going to, no personal feelings are going to have any influence on this commission or the outcome of this commission. But what they're doing is saying that the Israeli government and the IDF has entered into war crimes, or guilty of war crimes, from what their operation, I forget the name of the operation was, but the operation that they just recently launched in Gaza to fight the thousands of rocket attacks they've been getting.
It's called Operation Kill the Stupid People that are killing innocent civilians.
Anyway, with that, we have Nathan Leal joining us. Nathan.
All right. Wait, hey, Nathan.
Yes, sir.
Nathan Leal. Nathan Leal,
yes, sir.
From. All right, Nathan. I'm glad you're with us. I got something for you here. I got to hit this. I got to talk to you about this. I need to talk to you about this before you get into your stuff here, folks. Go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, and at HomelandSecurityUS.com. On the right-hand side is a link to Nathan's site. It's watchmanscry.com. It's a hot link right to Nathan's site, watchmanscry.com. Alternatively, you can go to Hagmann.com, and under the upcoming guests, you can click on that. And, yes, there is a hot link there. It's disguised. You have to hover over with your mouse, and then it will appear to watch. Or it's a nice broadcast. So you've got a couple of different options there. But Nathan, let me hit you with something first before you get into your stuff tonight. Your marvelous information, because I was talking with someone very close to me today, and I was directed to an article at CanadaFreePress.com. Okay, and if you want to go there, it's cool. It's disconnect. It's a top story at CanadaFreePress.com. It's disconnect, national preparedness for potential Ebola outbreak and what the public is told. The author is Dr. Eileena Johnson-Powell. Here is what got me, or what really made my head kind of almost want to explode. As we're looking at this article, again, it's CanadaFreePress.com, top story. It says this. Michael Snyder asked the obvious question, how in the world is it possible? Now, folks, as I read this, please pay very close attention to the numbers. How is it possible that more than 170, now numerology, 170 is actually 17, but okay, have been infected by the Ebola virus? The World Health Organization does not seem to have an answer, and so on. I'm not going to read every sentence, but I'm just going to read the ones with the numbers on them. The WHO released the information that West Africa has tallied 1,700 that's 1711, Ebola diagnoses, and 932 deaths. Okay, and the article continues. They talk about a subcommittee hearing on combating the virus threat held on 8/7/2014, August 7th, 2014, at the Rayburn House. And this continues. And if you continue through this, it's interesting. They mention Dr. Johnson, Eileen Johnson Powell mentions Dr. Stephen Hatfield. Remember that name from years past, the suspect in the anthrax probe. Remember him? Okay, well, he's referenced in this as well, talking about the new drug therapies for Ebola and emerging viral diseases. Anyway, onward. The results of the U.S. MRID 2013 study show when the serum was used on non-human primates, 43% of them recovered after an intravenous treatment. I'm going through this, I'm looking at the numbers, Nathan, and I'm thinking of Nathan Liao. I'm thinking of numbers, the significance of numbers. All of a sudden, the article, although it's a great article, is kind of taking a back seat to me wondering, is this some kind of a heads up? Is this some sort of a freaky communique? The numbers, in other words, do they represent perhaps some... now, you obviously, Nathan, you have probably not had a chance to either read the article or even look at this, and I'm hitting you kind of blind with this, but I guess my question to you, Nathan, is could there be something here with these freaky numbers, 17, and every time I turn around, I'm running into the number 17. It's like, it's weird. Or am I just seeing monkeys, climbing on my living room ceiling?
Man, that's a question with a volume of answers and a lot of different layers of answers. Doug and Joe, one of the things that amazes me constantly is as I do research into what the enemy is doing, and the enemy can be divided into the very top tiers where you have the spiritual realm, you have the destroyer, who's Satan, and then he transcends into the physical realm where he uses his earthly humans, his minions, to carry out his plan. And it amazes me that as the plan is being carried out, that I find myself amazed when I see the same type thing you're mentioning, the way the numbers add up, because when they wrote this report, that one person that had to be infected to make the number coincide with a profound symbolism was taken ill, so then they were counted. How does that happen on purpose? How does that happen in coincidence? And I believe that's another reason over and over that I stress and I want to make clear with my listeners and when I'm writing reports and doing my sermons and research, that this thing that's going on right now in the world is not normal. The events that are happening right now are profound beyond the regular ability to explain in the natural. They're profound. And for the people that have a problem acknowledging the spiritual dimension, and I know that it can be difficult at times because you can't see it and it takes faith, but for the person that observes these things happening, they either have to admit that it's something above human power or they have to deny it. But if they deny it, they're denying reality. So, Doug, I believe that we are witnessing very profound spiritual things, and these things are even getting into the area of end-time Bible prophecy. God is the maestro of the universe, and he has everything under his control. And I don't know what the heavenly board meetings look like when he assembles his hosts, and from time to time he allows the dark side to come in, and he has a conversation with him like what we can read in the book of Joel, where Satan was able The sons of God were able to come before God and discuss things, and Satan was able to come, and even to this day, until God kicks them out, Satan does have communication with God, and God has them on a short leash to do certain things, and these things that are taking place are going to take place to fulfill Bible prophecy. And here's the part that can get spooky and scary. From God's point of view in heaven, God is powerful, all-powerful. He is the boss of Satan. But here on earth, we're just children of flesh, and we can die, and we can get sick and ill, etc. So Satan is a powerful force to be reckoned with, and a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, and a lot of people don't really take it seriously. And I don't mean to digress in answering your question, but I think in summary, Doug, we're witnessing a spiritual thing that's beyond human explanation. There's no other way to explain it. And Satan is into his numbers. His minions are into their numbers. His followers are into numbers, and some of them do it on purpose, but some of them, it's amazing how things just happen on dates that are beyond the ability for man to have anything to do with it. It's incredible. What you're bringing up is incredible, and I think that as we continue to watch events take place, we're going to continue to see that everything is ordered. It's ordered chaos from the spiritual realm, and the numbers are a timestamp and a marker that it is ordered chaos from the spiritual realm. So that's the best explanation that I can give.
Well, okay, so what you're saying, I'm not really, seeing monkeys, and they do communicate. The powers, the Luciferian satanic powers, do communicate, and they may be communicating in a case like this. In other words, there might not be, for example, 1,711 or 17 or 170, but they might report it as such and therefore communicate it as such, or there might be, and it just, but there is this level of covert, semi-covert communication. We're using numbers and using symbols and using other things. Of course there is. You talk about it. So, but okay. Yeah, good answer. Thank you for that answer. I didn't mean to digress or to take you off of what you wanted to talk about, but I was just really concerned about this because I've been seeing 17 so much lately. MH17, the flight, and the 17s that's around that, and all of this other stuff. My goodness. So thank you, Nathan, for answering that, my friend.
Well, I don't know if I answered it to someone's approval, but Doug, when we look at news events in the natural, and me included, this morning when I was eating breakfast, I was going over some of the news events, and I saw the video of the police officers shooting tear gas at those news reporters and the rubber bullets. I saw that. I saw them taking down the equipment, and the natural part of me was very angry. I was watching it with my wife, and we're speaking to the computer screen saying, really? Where are we? What time is it now? I mean, if it's not more obvious that we're in a police state, that times have changed, that the Orwellian nightmare has finally arrived in America, here it is. And the natural part of you gets angry. And the patriotic American part of me wants to, do something in the natural. So I'm right there with you. And the big challenge, though, when we examine these events is to try our best. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this for everybody. And tonight as we go into the program, we are going to look, once again, as we regularly do, Doug, when I come on the program, at events transpiring in the spiritual realm and try to associate them with what's happening now. We have to look at the big picture. And I want to challenge everyone to try to do that as we're examining these things. I know it's not easy, but if we have that type of understanding, then I fully believe that God's people will be able to rise up and be used by Him to do great things and great exploits. I fully believe that, Doug.
I do too. And what a great statement for you to make, Nathan. And thank you for making that. I truly believe that as well. And folks, I hope you all heard that and really took that to heart. Thank you for saying that, Nathan. I believe it.
Well, I wanted to start off by, can we start? Or did you want to?
Yeah, okay, sure.
I I want to start off by just saying that I am finishing up on a new sermon, and it's going to take 2 different sessions to do it. And I found it interesting. I believe you had Steve Quell on recently, or Pastor Langford, and they talked about Gideon. Is that true? I didn't hear the show. But
yeah, last night.
Okay, it was last night. Well, the sermon that I'm about to release is about Gideon, amazingly. Wow. And I've been really studying and digging and doing a lot of research on the life of Gideon and what was going on during the time when God called him, what Israel looked like, what they were feeling, experiencing with their neighbors, the oppression, the vexation, etc. And so I'm about to release that sermon. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are on my list to receive sermons, you'll be getting that notification soon. If you're not, you can go to my website, Watchman's Cry, and you can hear it when I release it. But I believe, Doug, that it's very, very important for we as Christians, again, to try to see things in the multifaceted level, multidimensional level, including the physical and the spiritual. And so in this message I'm releasing about Gideon, I am going into the behind the scenes that took place during the time of Gideon's calling. Now, real quick, though, for those that aren't familiar with the book of Judges and the scriptures, we can see over and over the repeated cycle of the children of Israel obeying God, being good to God, being nice and obedient, but then backsliding and falling into idol worship and Baal worship to the point where God had to say, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to have to wake you guys up and let you know that you can't continue in that way because this is wrong. So God would punish them and allow vexation to come to Israel, and the vexation that God allowed was a judgment that transpired in oppression and invasion from the neighbors. So when Gideon was called, Israel had been oppressed for 7 years by their neighbors, the Midianites, and the Midianites were a bane in their existence. They were a thorn in their side. They were briars on their side. They were their neighbors, and the Midianites had been an aggravation to Israel for centuries. In fact, if you go back in time, the Midianites were the ones that sold Joseph off to slavery, and they were also the ones that caused problems with Israel when they were wandering in the desert. And I don't want to go into the details of what they did when the children of Israel were in the desert, but I do want to say this, and it's real important that we as Christians can get a hold of this thing. The children of Israel were told by God over and over not to participate in Baal worship. And for some reason, they found themselves disobeying that order. Now, when most Christians today, Doug, consider and think about what was the attraction of Baal worship, most pastors today, when they talk about Baal worship, they illustrate Baal worship from the standpoint of, well, there's these statues that Israel just couldn't resist bowing down to. What? Why couldn't they? I don't know, but they found the statues so alluring they had to bow down to them. And most people who have not researched Baal worship would conclude with that. And when I was a younger Christian, I always wondered about it. What was the attraction of Baal worship? But if we were to take the time to really analyze what Baal worship is, it's good old-fashioned fornication and adultery and sexual orgies. Because Baal worship, when they had their little ceremonies and their rituals, part of the ritual included an orgy and everyone playing with each other, and you know, when the golden calf story that we hear about, when the children of Israel built their golden calf and had Aaron make it, and God got angry with them, it was the same thing. So Baal worship includes sexual sin, and there is something very, very powerful about sexual sin. Sexual sin transcends the regular physical realm of violations to God's laws because it gets into the spiritual. And I'm bringing this up because America today is, of course, backslidden. They have forgotten God. But for the most part, when we analyze America and see what some of America's problems are, sexual sin is one of the biggest problems that's taking place here in America. And when a country falls into sexual sin, satanic forces are able to come in and then wreak havoc on the country. Now, the sexual sin I'm talking about is not just fornication or adultery. It spans a lot of perversion that's happening in America. And here's the part that's disturbing, Doug and Joe. The perversion that is taking place in America is being endorsed by the media, entertainment, Hollywood, politicians. Obama declared, I believe it was June or July, Gay and Lesbian Month again, as his regular habit is. And states are passing laws that are legalizing gay marriage, which is perverted. And Satan knows that if he can get a nation perverted in the sexual area, that nation will have chains of bondage where they will not be able to break. It'll be very difficult for the people of the nation to understand that they are in a bondage. And so as a result, here in America, that's what we see happening. Hollywood promotes the gay agenda, and the gay agenda is now a very popular topic that is promoted in TV programs, comedies, movies that are coming out. In the NFL, we have the first gay football player now that came out of the closet. In colleges, they're coming out. In our military, they're being paraded. And over, we read in the book of Isaiah, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. But here in America, evil is now good, Doug and Joe. So when we examine the timestamp of America's morality, right now, 2014, we can see a nation that has forgotten common sense. We can see a nation that is now corrupted and perverted and now has given themselves over to the flesh. That's why when we look in the book of Revelation, it says that Babylon is the great whore because it causes the whole world to fall into the sexual sin. So it's old-fashioned Baal worship once again, but now it's wreaking havoc on every part of our culture, Doug and Joey. From the public schools, our students, our children are being indoctrinated with perversion, how to do horrible things that are unsightly that people shouldn't even discuss. It's now out in the open, down to the kindergarten age, middle school, high school, indoctrination. The perversion is all throughout our culture. So when we see and evaluate and diagnose the purity of America, we get a failing grade. We get a big fat F, ladies and gentlemen. And because we have a big fat F, this is why God then does the next stage of his judgment. Now, getting back to what I was talking about regarding Gideon. In the book of Judges, chapter, and I'll just share this real quick. I'm not going to go into the entire message, but in the book of Judges, chapter 6, it starts out, the very first words of Judges chapter 6 say, then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. That's how it starts out. So, right out of the gate, then. And then the next sentence says, so the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel then had to hide in dens, caves, and they had to bug out and try to get away from their oppressors. But, Doug, the frustration in the natural. Now, let's get back to what I was saying this morning when I was eating breakfast. I'm looking at this news report, and I'm watching the police fire tear gas at the news people, which is a blatant disregard for the Constitution. But it's right there, out in the open. How can they get away with that? How could this happen? How did we get here? And in the natural, we scratch our heads and say, how? I'm mad. I want to do something about it. Who do I call? Who do I write? Who do I email, etc.? But we have to look at this event beyond the natural. We have to look at it in the spiritual. So why is it happening now? Well, let me just paraphrase the verse in Judges that I just read. When I said the children of Israel did evil in the sight of God, let me paraphrase that. Ladies and gentlemen, hear this. Then the children of America did evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of their enemies. So if we want to really see and comprehend and accept what's going on today in America, we are watching the judgment of God happen in America because America is full of spiritual misfits and spiritual knuckleheads that have forgotten the law of God. Plain and simple, Doug. Ladies and gentlemen, That's the reason. Patriots of America that are listening, that's the reason. For the government employees that are listening and members of the military that are mad at Obama, that's why it's happening. So what do we do about it? How do we get out of this mess? Well, that's going to be the topic of the next few years, because America is still blind. They will not acknowledge where they are. They will not acknowledge that they're dirty and corrupt. Americans, for the most part, do not think about this. The pastors behind pulpits are not grieving and lamenting over this. So as a result, we're going to be in a mess for several years. And, Doug, I see that we're at the top of the hour. Do you want me to hold that thought or continue?
Nathan, no, hold that thought. This is a good stopping point here, and I apologize for taking the few minutes I did initially, but I wanted to get your take on that. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this, the 14th day of August 2014. By the way, I just want to wish my daughter, she's an adult, a very happy 23rd birthday today. Jackie, happy birthday.
Ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Thursday, August 14th, 2014. Our special guest tonight is Nathan Leal. His website is watchmanscry.com. Bookmark that website. You'll see video updates, article updates, constant content given to you on this website. There's a forum on here, an interactive forum, and all types of good and informative stuff that you need for this time that we live in. Nathan, I'm going to turn it right back over to you and let you get right back into where we left off.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, I have a lot of different things that I want to mention to the listeners. There's a lot of topics I was going over. I was praying. I was asking God, what do I talk about? And by the way, I do ask God for every program, Doug and Joe, what he wants me to share. And I have a whole handful of different topics, so I'm going to just go through them. Is that okay? So we're not going to hit all one topic. In the third hour, we're going to talk about the New World Order and the Illuminati and some symbolism. I'm going to ask for the listeners to help me out figuring out, including you, Doug, because I found some things that I still haven't entirely figured out, but I believe that it's very profound. So we're going to talk about that. But one thing I wanted to start out with is I wanted to report that 2 weeks ago on Saturday, we had a very weird storm come through here in Idaho where I live. And I don't know if you heard about it, Doug and Joe. Of course, you've probably been seeing all the weird weather everywhere. The Frankenstorms, New York got a lot of rain recently, and Detroit got a lot of rain. And it was a storm that came out of nowhere. I was going to barbecue some hamburgers, and I looked up into the sky. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening, and I told my wife, those clouds do not look right. I'm going to have to – I had charcoal. I had just started them. The fire was getting just right to put some hamburgers on, and I looked at the sky, and I said, that does not look right. I got to put this fire out because we're about to have a bad storm. So I sprayed the hose on my barbecue pit, and then within 30 seconds of me putting out the fire, the wind started, and there was no rain, there was no thunder, it was just wind. And, in fact, the sky was still partially blue, but the wind started to blow, and it got stronger and stronger to the point where the trees around my house started breaking. And I have trees that are 2 to 3 feet thick around my property. Up here in Idaho, we have old-growth lumber. And I saw the trees. We have trees that are about 100 feet tall, 150 feet tall, if you can picture the Douglas firs of the Northwest. And these trees were bending at a 45-degree angle to the ground, to the horizon. I had never seen anything like that, ever. And then we started hearing cracking, and all over the neighborhood we started hearing the trees breaking. So then I immediately called to the family, and I said, you guys, we need to pray right now that God protects us, that none of the trees hit our house or hit our cars, or that we don't experience bad damage. So we got into a circle in our living room, and right within a few seconds of us starting to pray, the power went out, so then it was black. And we started to pray. We held hands, and I prayed, and I asked God to protect us. And, you know, Doug and Joe, the amazing thing about calling out to God when you're not ready, you know, I didn't get a memo in the morning saying, be ready to call out to God this afternoon. You don't get an announcement in advance to let you know that you're going to really be crying out to God in a few hours. It's weird that when it's time to cry out to God, you just do it, and you hope for the best. You try to reach way, way deep inside your spirit for faith, and you try your best to believe, because that's what faith is. You're hoping. Faith is hope. You're hoping that God's going to hear your prayer. So we started praying, and I asked God to protect our house. But when I was finished praying, I then was thinking, okay, what do I have to do right now? This thing is happening. It's in real time. The wind is howling, and I did not have a wind speed, a way to gauge the wind. But based on what I was seeing, I knew that the wind had to be at least 70 to 80 miles an hour or even higher, probably up to 90 or 100. That's how intense this wind was. So I went outside in my front deck, and I was looking at the wind that was pounding on me, and I started quoting Psalms 91 out loud. And I was walking back and forth on our deck, and when I was quoting Psalms 91, I felt so helpless, but I had faith also that I knew that God was there. But at the same time, when the wind's coming, you don't know what's going to happen. It's like watching a tornado come. You're trying to quote Scripture and take authority, but you don't know if it's going to work, so to speak. So I was walking back and forth on our deck. The wind was howling, and some gusts kept coming, and I said, you know what? I don't care if I look like an idiot. I don't care if I look silly to whoever's watching. And I was out there by myself, and then my kids came out, and I told them. My oldest son came out, and I told him that he needed to keep praying. But I tried to do what we read about in the Scriptures just because why not, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm throwing this out there because there is going to be time. There's going to be sessions. There are going to be events that are going to be coming to everyone in the whole world. But if we're here in America, since we know that we're under judgment, we're going to see some very scary events. When I was looking at the sky, Doug, I knew that it wasn't a natural storm. I knew that this thing was manufactured. There was something that some PhD behind a computer or keyboard was manufacturing and bringing to us here in the northern part of Idaho. It did not match any weather that I had seen. So I was doing spiritual warfare, and as the wind came, I spoke out loud to the wind. And ladies and gentlemen, I know this sounds crazy, but Jesus did it, and he said whatever he did, we can do. So I spoke to the wind, and as the wind was coming, I pointed to it, and I said, no, wind, we just prayed. We are covered by the blood of Jesus. We're covered by, it is written, Psalms 91, we are under the shelter of his wing. I started quoting scriptures like Jesus did in the desert. And I rebuked the wind, and I commanded it to go around our property. I commanded it to go to the left side of our property or the right, but it was not to come on our property, and I asked God to station his angels. I was trying my best to take authority over this thing, but again, I'm qualifying it. Doug, when you're trying to pray with authority, you're still hoping. You're still not sure. There's still an element of the unknown. So I want to establish that, and I want to qualify with this explaining this to let everybody know that I wasn't some spiritual mighty giant with confidence that I just knew that I knew that it was all going to be great, because I didn't know. I have lived long enough to know and experience events where things are beyond our control. I've had fires at our house. I know what that's like. And, you know, when you're experiencing weather that's not going in your favor, or just things, tragedies, accidents, fires, etc., the confidence level is not as strong as when things are going easy. So as I was rebuking the wind, time passed by, 5 minutes went by, 10 minutes, 15, 30, and then after about 45 minutes, it started to die down, and there was still a little bit of light. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening. There was a little bit of light left, and then the storm was finally over, and I said to the family, well, let's go see what the damage is. But there was one thing that I wanted to make clear again. Doug, I tried it. Jesus said you can speak to this mountain. Jesus calmed the winds. Peace be still. We know the stories in the Bible. So I tried it. And I told the wind that it could not break any of the big trees on our property. Now, I heard some small ones cracking, and there were little ones, 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches that cracked. But I commanded it not on our property boundary. It was not allowed to do that. Okay, so the storm was over, and we decided to see the damage. So I walked along the edge of our property to see what damage there was, and there was a tree that is right on our fence line, and this tree is about 3 feet thick at the base, and it snapped off about 30 feet up along its trunk. It snapped off. It was about 100 feet tall, 3 feet, and where it snapped off, the trunk of the tree came down and it landed right on our fence. And half of it landed on the other side of the fence, and a portion of it landed on the fence. So it was maybe about 10 or 15 of wire fence that it hit. And then there was another tree that hit right on the other side of the fence. It fell, and then a third one, same thing. But as I was looking at it, I was saying, now, and I looked at my wife. I asked my son, I said, now, do you see what I see? We were telling the wind it's not allowed to hurt our property. So the biggest tree that broke along the fence line, along the boundaries of our property. So I said, okay, well, that's interesting. Now, we also told the wind it had to go to the left and to the right. Now, in the book of Psalms 91, where it talks about the hidden in God, in the shelter of the Most High, Psalms 91, we all know that right. Very famous scripture that we quote. It shall not come nigh my dwelling. It shall go to the left and to the right, but not my dwelling. So I was quoting that. All right. So we walked down our driveway, and we went down our road, and the neighbor's house had a tree land right on its power line, and then it landed on the telephone pole, and it crushed the transformer, and the whole telephone pole came down, and it was laying across the street. So my neighbor had a tree on the telephone pole. Well, actually, it brought the whole thing down. And then the neighbor after him had 12 trees. And when I say trees, Doug, these are huge old-growth trees. These ones were like 4 feet across at the base, and he had 12 trees all in his front yard that just laid down all over his yard. It crushed his greenhouse. It laid out his power line, and it went across the street. They were so tall that it went across the street and took out the power line also with another transformer, and it was blocking our road. We couldn't even get out. There were like 5 trees laying across the road, and these are huge 3 to 4 foot tall trees with power lines under them. So we're looking at each other, and we're looking at the neighbors. We're saying, what do we do about this? I don't know. Well, let's just get our saws and do our best. So we started cutting. We stayed away from the one with the power line. But as I was cutting, I talked to my wife, and I said, we told the wind it couldn't come to our house. It had to go around us, to the left and to the right. And when I saw the aftermath, the trees on each side of our property, they destroyed everything. We were without power some people were out for 8 days. We were out for 3.5 days after this happened. And as I was examining all of this, Doug, in the natural, it's real easy to say, well, that was just coincidence. That was luck. It wasn't your prayers that made the trees hit the neighbors, but not you. That's all it was, so don't believe. But you know what, Doug? We are not children of the natural. We are children of the supernatural. And I'm sharing this event and this experience because, ladies and gentlemen, every one of us in the days that are approaching are going to experience some weird things that are going to surpass the ability to explain. They're going to be scary, and some of the events are going to be weather events where whether or not it's just regular nature rampaging the earth, or whether it's HAARP or the scientists or the government, the Air Force playing around with their weather control, whatever it is, we're going to see it happen. And Doug, I really, really believe in my heart of hearts that what we experienced then was a dry run by the U.S. government to just see if they were able to steer the weather and wreak havoc on northern Idaho, because here where I live in northern Idaho, there is a very, very high percentage of patriots and people who are just waiting to say no and to be activated, to say, point me, and I'm really ready for the revolution, et cetera. There's a lot of, quote-unquote, people ready to be freedom fighters here in northern Idaho. And the government knows this. They know that when the time comes, they're going to have a force to reckon with. But the U.S. military, on the other hand, the United States Air Force wrote a paper several years ago where it said that they want to own the weather by 2025, and weather control was going to be a force multiplier. Are you familiar with that paper? It's out there. You can get it on the internet.
Yes. Yep.
So we know that they play with the weather. We know that it's their little toy to play with. And when the time comes, I believe that they're also going to use crazy weather to subdue the people. Well, when the people want to go out there and riot and overturn police cars and say no or what are you doing, all they got to do is flip a switch and make it rain or make the wind howl or send a tornado to make the people shut up. So I'm bringing this up because, ladies and gentlemen, I believe one of the weapons of the New World Order is going to be weather control. So one thing that I really want to challenge everyone with is this. Please get familiar with Psalms 91 and get familiar with the scriptures where Jesus tells us that if we are his people and if we are living right, if we're walking in him, if we're walking in forgiveness, if we are walking in a life of repentance, if we are walking in his lordship, then we have at our disposal some very, very incredible spiritual tools where we can command the winds, where we can appeal to the heavens and ask God to make it go around us but not come near our dwelling. Now, I consider the end of that storm and what happened a miracle. I consider it an example of what prayer can do and what speaking with authority, even though you don't believe you have the authority at the time, but I believe it was an example of how we as God's people can do exploits for him. And I'm sharing this, and I believe it happened so I can share this with everybody. Because, Doug, there are people out there that, when we look at all the events happening in the natural, it can get scary. It can be spooky. It can feel helpless. There's a lot of odds that are not in our favor, to quote Hunger Games. So what we need to do is to increase the odds in the realm of the supernatural, but because we have a God that does care about us. Even though we are in judgment here in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, yes, the season is dark, and yes, there are scary things happening, and yes, there are going to be some events that are going to anger us, but mercy triumphs over judgment, and the mercy of God is still available for the people that want to get a hold of it and rely on it. So I want to just throw that out, Doug. There is mercy available, and also I have to say this, and this is another thing that's related to that storm that came. After the storm arrived, we had no power. The entire city of Priest River was without power. Sandpoint's a few miles away. They're about 24 miles from us. They were without power, and halfway down to Spokane, they were without power. There were over 100,000 people. I believe it was 60 to 80,000. It might have been close to 100. Had no power, and some of them had to go a whole week without power. When the event happens, it is too late to get fuel for your generator if you own a generator. It is too late to get the generator tuned up and primed and ready. It's too late to have buckets. How interesting, Doug. The last time I was on your show, I went through a little water dry run crisis. Remember that?
Yeah.
And here we were again, going through it again. But this time around, we were ready. It was amazing. I remember sharing on your program that when you have to think outside the box and live on a generator or to haul water, et cetera, it really wears you out and it drains you emotionally. So when this next event occurred where the power was out, I noticed that it was not as draining. It didn't wear us out like it did the first time. So what that told me was it was the first time was some training. It was a dry run. So I want to encourage everybody to also try your best if you can. If you're able to do this, go through the weekend without power and live off your generator, or try to do the survivalist shelter-in-place type methods to be able to survive. And for the people that haven't practiced, it's going to be much harder. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have all the stuff, you have all your tools, all the fun stuff you've been buying, off of Doug's sponsors and from Amazon.com and all those fun places, all those cool things, the gadgets, Doug. We need to try them out and use them and be familiar with them. And this is what I noticed. The power was out for our whole town. When we went out and about and we were talking to people, we were hearing stories from people that they had no generator. A lot of people were calling the hardware store, do you have any generators for sale? And when you have 60,000 people without power, the generators are going to sell out very quickly. So unfortunately, a lot of people did not have their generators, and their meat was spoiled in their freezers. I heard that tale. It happened for a lot of people. They weren't ready. So the other thing, ladies and gentlemen, have fuel, have a generator, no matter what size it is, at least to keep some of the necessities going, to be able to get water or to keep your freezer, to be able to preserve your perishables or whatever you have that you could lose in the event of power being out. It's very important to do these things right now. And, Doug, you know, it's easy to get on this program and tell the people to do it, and they say, yeah, you know what, we should, and they take notes and write it down, but then 2 or 3 days later they forget. So, ladies and gentlemen, please try to do this. This is the homework from the Hagmann Show here on Thursday night. You agree, Doug? We have to get ready for this. So,
I'm with you, brother.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, be prepared. That's the theme of what we're doing. Now, here's the other thing that I was going to throw in. The neighbor who lost all the trees, the 12 trees, it ruined his yard. It was a lot of damage. Thousands of dollars of damage occurred to him. That neighbor is one of the most hated neighbors on our street. No one likes him because he's an alcoholic and he's real abusive to his kids. His wife and kids, he basically did the mail order bride thing, and he got them from the Ukraine. So the Ukrainians, his wife and 2 teenagers, and he is an alcoholic. When we first moved into our neighborhood a year ago, we met them, and we had the Ukrainian lady at our house, and she told us how she escaped the Ukraine during horrible times 10 years ago. And I said, wow, God saved you. God spared you. God made it possible for you to come here to America. And she interrupted me and said, no. There is no God. I don't believe in God. And when I heard her say that, she was sitting in my dining room table, and she said that, Doug, I don't know if I'm too simple-minded when it comes to this, but I think for someone to say that they don't believe in God is just the silliest thing that anyone could say. The words are leaving their lips. So I started laughing. I couldn't believe it. I laughed for probably 10 seconds. She goes, what's so funny? And I said, what you just said. You just told me that God helped you leave, even though you didn't give him the credit, and it was a miracle that you were able to leave the Ukraine with your family, et cetera, and then you're telling me that you don't believe in God? She says, yes, there's no God. So they are acknowledged atheists, and for the last year, they have made it clear that they're atheists. But here on our side of the equation, I have told my wife and I've told my kids that we need to try our best to minister to them and reach out to them. So I feel sorry for them because they don't have any faith. I really, really do. So here's the interesting part, Doug. You got Nathan, the crazy watchman, rebuking the wind and telling the trees and the wind that it's not allowed to fall on his property. When the storm was over, the closest it came was along the fence line. That was it. Meanwhile, you have the neighbor of Nathan, who is an acknowledged atheist, and his kids are atheists. We invited them to church. They don't want to go. They let us know that they don't believe in God. They're the ones that received all the damage. They had no protection. They were wiped out, and it was very clear when you looked at the 2 examples of faith versus not giving God credit. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that are still struggling with your faith, or you're still wondering if God is real, if he's out there, if this Christian thing is real, it will become more and more obvious and apparent in the days that are coming that God is real for those that rely on him and for those that are willing to step out in faith and do some great exploits of faith. It's going to become obvious. But for those that deny God, Doug, Joe, it's going to be sad because they have nothing to depend on. They do not have the ability to ask God for mercy, for his protection, for his cloak, his bubble, his hand, to be under the shelter of his wing. That's sad, but that's what we're going to see happen. So while quote-unquote doom is approaching our land here in America, ladies and gentlemen, the people that have faith are going to weather the storm better than the people that do not have faith. But also let me add this, Doug. After the storm, when we saw the atheist neighbors with all their destruction, the next day I went to their house and I saw that there were just trees everywhere. It was blocking their driveway, and they didn't know what to do. And I told them that I would get my kids, and we would go there and we would help them to clear to make a path so they could at least get out of their driveway. So my two teenage sons helped me, and we spent a good amount of time the next day. It was all day on Sunday, and we got our chainsaws, and we worked very hard to clear the area so that they could be in a better situation. And while we were doing it, I kept whispering a prayer for them, and I kept telling my boys, boys, we're doing this because we don't have a choice. We're doing this because they're our neighbors, and you're supposed to help your neighbor, and God's going to bless us by doing this. And I kept saying that, Doug. We didn't have power, but I just kept saying that because I wanted to make an impact, because no one else in the neighborhood would help them. No one likes them. So we had to do it. So as we were working, by the end of the day, we were worn out, we were tired, we were sore, hot, spent, and then we went home. We turned on the generator, took showers, and then we ate our food, and we went to bed. But in the middle of the night, I got up, and I went to the bathroom, and I was getting back in bed, and the Holy Spirit said something to me. It was very, very clear. It was very obvious. I laid my head on the pillow. It was the middle of the night, and the Holy Spirit said, "Give, and it shall be given to you." And he recited the whole verse. Good measure, pressed down, shall men give unto you. The measure you give is what God will give to you. And the Holy Spirit quoted that. And I didn't know what it meant. And I said, okay, amen. Thank you, God. And I went to sleep, and when I woke up, I told my wife, guess what Holy Spirit told us? Given it shall be given to you. Well, here's the miracle that happened the next day. Actually, it was the day after. I'm sorry. I don't want to get ahead of myself. It was the day after the miracle that happened. We were eating breakfast, and we were planning the day. Okay, we got to go get more fuel, keep the generator going. What do we have to do? We have to move wires around. We have to power up the freezer for a while, and then unplug that, and then hook up the water well so we can take showers. There's a lot of strategic planning when you're using a generator. So we were planning what we were going to do, and we had already been down to the end of the driveway. We knew that the power company had not been on our street. The power lines are still laying across the ground on the street. The transformers laying in the ditch. And so we're eating breakfast, Doug, and the lights turned on of our house. And we looked and we said, how in the world can the lights be on when the power line is destroyed because it comes in where all the transformers were destroyed. And we scratched our head, and then we went down and we looked, and it appeared that the power company had come and clipped the power lines right at the end of our driveway, so everything that went to the east that was on the ground stayed off, which included the atheist neighbors, but everything going to the west, starting from the end of our driveway, the power line, they rerouted the power, and we were the very end of the line. They turned us on. It went the other way. So
wow.
I couldn't believe it, because that's not the way they do it. There was too much. They spent $1 million repairing. It was outside their budget. They spent a lot of money. It's a small little PUD power company. And I told my wife and I told my kids, I said, you guys, do you see what just happened here? We helped the neighbors because we felt sorry for them, and then the Holy Spirit said, given it shall be given to you. And that was the reward, Doug. We had our power back, and we didn't want to tell our neighbors who had the broken transformers and the atheists. I didn't want to rub it in, so I didn't say anything to them when we went and ran our errands. But we said, how long are they going to be out? And it took 2 more days for them to get theirs back. So it was up to 5 days for them. But this is another lesson that I want to throw out there. Now, Doug, I have heard a lot of survivalist programs. I've heard the Patriots talk about how when the lights turn off and the grid goes down, you got to protect your family, and you can't give away your food, and you can't trust anybody, and if anyone comes up your driveway, you know, ruffle your feathers and tell them to keep walking. Right. I don't have anything for you. And I keep hearing the Patriots who say they're Christians talk about how it's all for me and nobody else. I hear the Patriots talk about how you can't trust anyone, and that's just too bad. And I see YouTubes that say this. I see, and I don't have to explain. You know what I'm talking about. You've heard those as well.
Oh, yeah.
Don't trust anyone, especially that mean neighbor that was a jerk 6 months ago. Don't help them. But I want to throw this out instead. I want to throw out an alternative situation. When judgment happens over a nation, it doesn't happen just because God wants to do target practice with his lightning bolts. The reason God does judgment is he wants the people to soften their hearts and repent. He wants them to start behaving. He wants them to start living the way they're supposed to. He wants them to start acknowledging the 10 Commandments, which, by the way, it's summed up in love your neighbor as yourself. And love the Lord thy God and your neighbor. So God wants to see Christians behave like they're actually, truly followers of Christ. He wants to see Christians behave like they have actually taken up the cross, denied themselves, and helped others. So for those people out there who have the mentality that when the grid goes down and when doom arrives, that it's going to be every man for himself, dog eat dog, thinning of the herd, Darwin Award, all that stuff, you know what, Doug? God is up in heaven, and God is keeping the score, because those that live according to what God says in his word are the ones that God's going to bless. And if any people want to rely on Psalms 91, under the shelter of his wing, he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High, anyone that wants to live that way needs to pick up the entire package, needs to be willing to be an example to their neighbors and to their friends. And the ones that do that, the Holy Spirit told me, Doug, he said, give and it shall be given to you. And I know that everything that I went through was to explain on this program. I want the listeners to get a hold of this. Ladies and gentlemen, please hear what I'm saying. The people that are jerks to one another during doom are not going to make it. And God will say, okay, now I know where your heart is. See, here's the deal, Doug. God turns off the lights to see what people are going to do. He turns off the lights to see how people are going to respond and how people are going to react. So the things that are coming, the experiences that we are having right now, the frustrations that we are seeing, the temptations that we have against the Constitution and reacting, et cetera, all of those are part of the test. God is watching us. And I know that people don't want to hear that. Doug, who wants to hear that? Well, you mean I have to see the cops send tear gas to the news guy as a test? Well, what's the test? And of course, that's a whole other program to talk about. Well, how do we respond to that? I don't know, Doug. There's a lot of things that are going to be worked out in the lives of God's people, and there's a lot of things that need to be worked out in America. And by the way, I'm not saying that police state measures are good for the country and it's okay. I'm not dismissing them, because getting back to what I mentioned earlier about Gideon, when God raised up Gideon, it was after they had been oppressed for 7 years by their neighbors. And this is what another thing that needs to be placed on the table. After America learns its lesson, and that's going to be determined by how quick we get it and we figure it out, and the pulpits start reminding everybody what's going on and engaging people in repentance and revivals, that has to happen. And after that happens, if we start seeing a nationwide reformation of revival and through repentance, keyword, Doug, if we start seeing that, then God is going to raise up some Gideons. God's going to raise up the patriots who are full of the Holy Spirit. God's going to raise up the spokesmen and the leaders who will then say, no, I don't think so, and we'll be able to talk to our oppressors and those that are vexing us and those that are against the Constitution and standing up for righteousness. But first, we have to go through the correct channels. We have to go through the correct steps. So I'm not endorsing the police state that's coming. I'm just saying that after America repents, I'm hopeful, Doug, if the Lord tarries. I got to qualify this. If this theme that we are seeing in America is not leading into the tribulation, in 2 months or in 6 months or next year, et cetera, if we have a little bit more time, then I am hopeful that my children will be able to see America turned around. Probably hobbling, probably limping along, but I'm hopeful that America will have its eyes open and this will work in a way to purge all the corruption and the garbage that is here. Because as it stands right now, Doug and Joe, what other way are we going to have to get rid of all this nonsense with the gay marriage and all this homosexual, all these laws that are endorsing gay marriage, et cetera? What is it going to take to stop that? Do laws get erased in the books? Is it possible that if America went through a great revival that some politicians and statesmen would rise up and say, you know what, let's turn that around, let's repeal it, et cetera? Well, I believe it is, because otherwise, what else do we have to hope in? So I'm presenting all this information as hope, ladies and gentlemen, that we can do our part to be used of God so that we can be able to do great exploits. Now, 3 months ago, Doug, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was on the shore of a little island. It appeared to be an island, and I saw some high waves coming in. It wasn't really a tsunami, but there were waves that were about maybe 10 or 15 feet high. And I saw them approaching, so I climbed up on the little island, had a mountain on it. It was kind of a pointed, small island. It wasn't that big. Maybe it was about a mile across. So I went to high ground, and the waves hit. And then as I was looking to the ocean, I saw another one coming in. So I went to higher ground, and then that one hit. And this happened 4 or 5 times. And I continued to go on higher ground until I was at the very peak of this mountain. There was no more high ground to go to. And after I reached the high ground, maybe the peak was about 20 feet left. Everything else was submerged. So I'm sitting on this peak, this rock in the middle of the ocean. And then I heard a voice speak, and the voice said, you must stay on the rock if you want to be protected, because the rest of the world is also submerged. And I said to the voice, the entire world is underwater right now? And the voice said, yes, but if you stay on the rock, you will be protected. And then the dream was over, and after I woke up, I thought about it, and I wondered, does that mean a tsunami's coming? Does it mean Noah's flood, part 2 is coming? And then over time, God has revealed and shown me that that's not what it is. It's a spiritual interpretation. And this is what it means, Doug. The waves of judgment have been pounding the surf of the world, and each time they arrive, they don't recede. They stay there, and then another wave of judgment comes, and it pounds the surf of the world to the point where most of the world now, and I believe we can acknowledge this and we can agree on this, most of the world is under waves of horrible darkness and horrible chaos and confusion and destruction. The world is in a mess right now. The world is going through a season where I've never witnessed this ever in my life, and I'm sure that we can agree. That's why I titled this program America's Descent into Darkness and Chaos, because America is descending. America's fallen. America's underwater with darkness. And this is the other message. It is. And this is the message that must be made clear to all the listeners. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to survive this inundation of darkness, then you have to find the rock. And the rock, of course, is Christ. The rock is Jesus. You have to get on the rock, and you have to ascend up the mountain of God, and it has to be you and God. Because if you reach high ground with God, then the darkness and the flood waters will be below you, and then you'll be able to have a good vantage point, and you'll be able to survive. So that's one of the key things that must be stated, Doug. And I'm bringing this information to hopefully set some spiritual rationale to what's going on, to the developing news, to the crazy, bizarre news stories. I'm trying to bring some sanity, spiritual sanity, with what's going on in the news so that we can have the right perspective. We started out with the Ebola virus. You were asking me, what is it? And when I spoke to you on the phone yesterday, you asked me, what do I think it is? What's going on? Is it a false flag? Is it fear-mongering? Is it to get us to take the vaccine? There's a lot of questions, right, Doug? A lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Why is it happening? Every day I open my email box and there's more stories about how it's spreading to another nation, how it's arrived. I got another one. It arrived in Brazil. It's spreading throughout the world. So is this a manufactured crisis? Is it contained? Is it under their control? Are they trying to have it under their control? Are they losing control? A lot of questions. But in summary, I would say this. And by the way, let me ask you this question, Doug. Excuse me, let me take a drink. The Ebola virus, some of the symptoms of the Ebola virus are horrible. The hemorrhaging.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The people bleed out.
That's right. Any orifice, blood from all orifices.
It's nasty.
Believe it, yeah.
Well, in the Bible, and I've shared this many times on your program, I've talked about the fourfold judgment. I've talked about how there is a spiritual precedent to really get an idea of how God spanks the land, spanks the country, spanks the kingdom, spanks the people. And the book of Ezekiel chapter 5 talks about the 4 categories of judgment. Now, when God would judge Israel in the Old Testament, he did not always throw all 4 categories on them. Sometimes there was 1 or 2. Sometimes there was 3 of them or all 4. But there's 4 of them that God can use. And I find it interesting that in the book of Ezekiel chapter 5, verse 17, it says something real interesting. Do you guys have your Bible there in front of you? Is there? Can you read Ezekiel 5:17? Because as we're looking at Ebola, ladies and gentlemen, if you have your Bibles, take a look at this. Doug, if you have it, can you read that?
Joe's got his handy right here.
Okay, Joe.
Mine's on my bookshelf.
5 what?
5:17.
17.
And folks, by the way, you're listening to Nathan Leal, watchmanscry.com. Go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the link, or Hagmann and Hagmann, and click on the link. Take you right to his website. Go ahead, Joe.
Ezekiel 5:17. So I will send upon you famine and evil beasts, and they shall bereave thee, and pestilence and blood shall pass through thee, and I will bring the sword upon thee. I, the Lord, have spoken it.
Okay, pestilence and blood shall pass through you. The pestilence, the plague that God sends, causes them to bleed out. Interesting. So I've seen that over the past few years, Doug, and I've always wondered, when the swine flu was around a few years ago, it kind of phased out, it fizzled out, and it didn't have the intended effect. I don't know if it mutated and got weaker, but it didn't have the effect they wanted. So the question is this the plague part 2 or part 3? Or, we have the SARS and the MERS and TB and all these crazy, bizarre illnesses, respiratory related, but now we have the Ebola virus that causes the people to bleed out. And then we can read it here in Ezekiel as part of the fourfold judgment. So as I examine the scriptures, Doug, again, ladies and gentlemen, we can't leave it out. We can't dismiss it. So here's the question regarding the Ebola threat. Is it the plan? Is it fluff? Is it fear-mongering? Is it real? And if it's real, is it Bible prophecy? And if it's Bible prophecy, is it Bible prophecy related to the judgment of a land, or is it actually end-time prophecy, meaning the pale horse is about to ride? Is it a sign of the tribulation about to start? And if that's the case, Doug, then here's the next question. Does that mean that we're that far along? And I'm asking that question honestly because I know it's easy for people to just throw out with a blanket absolute answer. Some people say, yeah, that's what it is. We're there. I have proof. We're there. I know we are. And I remember people saying we were there 3 years ago, Doug, or 5 years ago, or 6, or 8.
Yeah. You know what, Nathan? It is so easy, and I want to reiterate that because I think it's extremely important. Look, there are things in this life that are black and white. Obviously, the Bible, black and white. The Word of God, black and white. Sin, evil versus good, black and white. But when you start getting into the Bible prophecy, and you are so sure of your position based on your interpretation, your analysis of Bible prophecy, let me caution you to those people who are saying, well, yeah, we're in it, and this is it, and end the story. Well, what if your analysis is not correct or off by a little bit? What is that going to do? You know, could that affect your faith or the faith of others, especially and that's why we hold it very, very dear, our responsibility as watchmen, Nathan, Joe and I. We don't want to make any type of sort of statements that would be wrong in interpretation, incorrect in interpretation, because, in other words, if we said, look, we're entering into the time of the tribulation, well, that's a good thing to say, or interesting thing to say, a titillating thing to say. But are we? And I don't think there's any human that could really make that statement with authority. Do you, Nathan?
I don't, and thank you for saying that, because I believe as watchmen we have to also have intellectual honesty and intellectual integrity when talking about the matters of meaning. We must consider several possibilities of what we're witnessing. Now, number one, we're either at the door, it started, or it's a ways off. But is there a way that we can look in Scripture to find anything that can let us know what we're watching? And I believe there is. And I think that we can sum it up with this, and it's found in Matthew 24, verse 7. And we've all heard this verse, Doug. You've probably quoted it a lot on this program. But that's where we are. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, number one, pestilence, number two, and earthquakes in various places. These are the beginning of sorrows. And the verse right before us, it says, see that you're not troubled. All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So how do we describe what we're watching if the Ebola is going to go worldwide and if it's going to become another plague like the Spanish flu in 1917? What do we call it? Where do we find it in the Bible? I believe we can call it part of the beginning of sorrows. That's where we are, the birth pangs, the beginning of sorrows. So the big sorrow of the tribulation is not here, but pestilence is mentioned. So that's actually prophesied. So before the tribulation can start, we have to see kingdom rising against kingdom, famine, pestilence, and earthquakes. And lo and behold, Doug and Joe, that's what we are watching right now, the chaos taking place. I believe it shows that we're in the preliminary stages before the tribulation, which does include, unfortunately, a lot of doom news. And then here's the other thing. America, while we are in this time of sorrows, is being judged right now. God's chastising America. So the big question is, how long is it going to last? Is it going to continue in a downward spiral? That part I don't know. I have seen a lot of prophetic visions, and a lot of others as well have seen prophetic events come to America. And here's the other thing that needs to be qualified. Many of the things that they saw happen to America could have been in one of two categories. They could have been for the judgment that's happening now, and some of them could have been for America when the tribulation starts. So it could be way into the future. And those things need to be qualified. And that's one of the difficult things about experiencing a prophetic vision or a dream or a word, etc., is when it happens, when you see it, when you experience it, it feels at the time impending. It feels like it's going to happen tomorrow. But God showed John how long ago some of the things he saw. God showed Dmitri Duduman so long ago. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just trying to place honesty and integrity in the prophetic tools that God gives us. We have to qualify what we're seeing and how we deal with this mess that we're in. But at minimum, we are in the times of sorrows, Doug. And, Matthew 24, 6 and 7, that's a lot of stuff that's mentioned right there. We will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Oh, boy, right now, on Drudge every day. And nation will rise up. The kingdom will rise up against kingdom, which, by the way, the Greek word for that is means races of people will rise up against. So that's race wars happening. And then famines, pestilence, and earthquakes, various places. These are the beginning of sorrows. And then verse 9 says, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. So that's going to be the next part of the chain of events that are coming. By the way, Doug, I want to throw this out. For the people that say, Nathan, I can't believe you're saying that. Don't you know it's going to start this summer or this winter or this fall? Tribulation is starting. Well, maybe. I don't know. But if that's true, then that would mean that the villain of the tribulation has to be working already. He has to be in the public eye. He has to be making news already. And if the villain of the tribulation is making news, here's the next question. Who is he? And if we're there, who could he be? And, oh, boy, Doug, does that open a can of worms? Who's the bad guy? Who's Mr. Demolition Man?
Exactly. And and I don't believe he's going to have a name tag. I just don't.
Is it Obama? Half the people are saying yes, others are saying no way, he's too silly.
I got to tell you, as far as, for example, the Antichrist, it's interesting. I think that there's at least for me, there's a distinct lineage, a line that has to be followed from Cain to the Antichrist. But there are Antichrist figures that have been walked the earth for so long. But Nathan, if I can, let me just, people have a tendency to live in the moment and not to really understand that before us many bad things happen. For example, I was doing some studying of some previous conflicts, and folks, if you go back, and I'm just real quick here, a couple of things. If you go back to the 755 to 763, the Anshi Rebellion, there were 33 million dead. It was a violent revolt against the Tang Dynasty. Then you had the Mongolian conquest, the 13th century, 50 million dead. Do you think that during those times people thought, man, this is it? And of course, the Taiping Rebellion back in 1851 to 1864, 30 million dead were. There was this Chinese battle, the Second Sino-Japanese War in the early, 1937 to 45. You're talking 20 million dead. Collapse of the Ming Dynasty in the early 1600s, 25 million dead, and on and on and on. So we've had wars. World War I, World War II, of course. Folks, World War I claimed 17 million, and don't forget that was when the first time tanks were used and poisonous gas was used. So as we look back through time, 60 million dead were in World War II. Now, think about that in the context of today. And that's why I mentioned it, because what you said, Nathan, is absolutely correct. We have to look at things in context. We'll have to look at things, and what that means. If this is the end, then of course the man of perdition's got to be walking the earth. And who is he? And so you make a lot of great points, but let's not think of what's taking place here in a time vacuum. We've seen many things in the past. So I just wanted to bring that up, Nathan. I think it's important to put things in context.
Thank you. Well, we're at the top of the hour again, so I'll hold my thoughts.
All right, yeah, we'll take a quick break and come right back with Nathan Liao. His website is watchmanscry.com. Bookmark that website and check it frequently for audio sermons and other content.
I love this website. I love this website, Joe.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We're going to take our top of the hour break on this Thursday, August 14th, 2014, with our very special guest, Mr. Nathan Liao. We'll be right back.
Oh, yeah, it's a great website. Learn a lot from this man, who by the way, I could just picture him during that storm as kind of like a young Moses with a staff, in his front yard, and his next door neighbor like the Shrek, an ogre, kind of ogreish fella, and all the damage and destruction's over there, and Nathan's with the staff opening the clouds, and that's kind of how it goes. But Nathan, welcome back, sir.
Thank you. That's good. I didn't feel that confident during when it was happening, but I'll tell you what.
Well, it sounds as if people don't believe that we have the power and authority over certain things. But I believe we do, and I think you prove it. I mean, it's great. So go anywhere. Take us anywhere you want to take us this hour, Nathan.
All right. I want to now talk about the Illuminati in our final time here. And in order to do this, I have some notes that I prepared, and I have them on my website. So if you go to my homepage, the show notes there, Doug, and I have some images that I want to go over. This has to do, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this doesn't have people saying, oh, man, really, again? It's been, 7 months now? Come on, get over it. But the Illuminati, over and over, we started out the program talking about the numbers, the weird numbers, the odd numbers, what seemed coincidental. And
right.
The Illuminati and the powers of the enemy, for some reason, value numbers, and they value symbolism. The Freemasons have stated openly that what they like to reveal, they conceal it in plain sight, and only those that have the quote-unquote illumination of the Freemasonic order have the ability to interpret the symbols. The other ones, the profane ones, cannot interpret. So they have it in plain sight, and they love to parade their images in front of everyone. Well, when I was doing my research for the Super Bowl way back when, Doug, there was one part of my research that I never talked about, and I found it, and it's incomplete. I was not able to finish it, and that's why I said previously that I'm going to throw this out, and for the sleuths that are out there, for those that like to discover and investigate, maybe you can help me out with this and make some sense of this. So I'm saying right off the bat right here, I'm qualifying it, Doug. I don't have all the answers of this, but I believe what I came across is very, very profound. And it has to do with the commercial, the Pepsi halftime commercial where the giant hands were playing the instruments. They played the Manhattan Bridge. You remember that? During the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so in my page of notes, if you go to my website and you click notes, I have the YouTube of the giant hands. It's just 30 seconds long. Actually, okay, if you look at how long it lasts, 33 seconds. Interesting. That's how long it lasts. If you watch that short video, it was an animation to remind some people, if you don't have this link in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, during the Super Bowl, some giant hands came down out of the sky and started to pluck on the Manhattan Bridge, and then they started to play the trumpet at a power station and then beat the drums on the Guggenheim, and then they started to play the drums again on a Pepsi sign, and then they started moving some subway trains around, and then they turned the Columbus Circle into a giant turntable, and then a giant hand came over at MetLife Stadium, and it moved it back and forth, and then it said, it's time for the halftime show. But it ended that little 33-second commercial with Live for Now. That was from Pepsi. Over the last few months, I've looked at that thing, and I believe that before I started researching, Doug, I believed, and I, in my gut, had the notion that something was there, something deeper than what they presented. Now, to the individuals who were involved in the animation process, the 3D artists and all of the editors and the cinematographers, all those guys involved in it, whether or not they did this purposely, maliciously, or deliberate, I cannot answer that. However, I will say this. It is very interesting that over and over we continue to see television programs and the media, commercials, etc., being used to forecast and telegraph events that are coming to America, terrorism events. Example, 9/11 was on The Simpsons, and some symbolic images were seen in a lot of different programs, the Lone Wolf program, the TV show, etc. So does Satan inspire people of the world? Indeed, he does. And we need to go no further than the scriptures when Peter was talking to Jesus, and Jesus said, "Who do they say that I am?" And he said, "You're the Son of the living God." And then Jesus said, "Heaven and earth didn't reveal this to you, Peter, but my Father in heaven." And then a few moments later, several verses down on the page of your Bible, Peter is telling Jesus, "You're not going to get crucified." And Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." So Satan inspired Peter several moments later. So if Peter could be inspired by Satan, then how easy would it be for these artists and animators and people involved in the media to also be inspired when they don't even know it? And so this is my conclusion, Doug and Joe. There are individuals in the media who are being used as marionettes and pawns to show the symbolism of the enemy and the symbolism of what we can find happening in current events, or they telegraph events that are coming. Whether they know it or not, they're being used. So I want to now talk about this 33-second Illuminati Freemason commercial. Now, Doug and Joe, have you had a chance to look at it for a quick summary? Did you click on it? Do you have it in front of you?
Yes.
Yeah, I have it in front of me, and I think my dad does too.
Okay. I took some screen captures below the YouTube so that we can go through it one by one. Now, on a program several months ago, Doug, we went over this, but it was real fast, and the main point that I wanted to bring, I didn't bring up, but we're going to talk about it right here. Now, number one, this commercial starts out with the giant animated hand plucking the Manhattan Bridge. And it plucks it like it was a guitar, and then it tunes it. The fingers come closer, and it starts turning some of the caps on the top of the bridge, and it starts tuning it to show that, hey, isn't that cool? The hand can play the bridge. But below the surface layer, what do we see going on in this image? Well, the Manhattan Bridge, first of all, is 322 feet tall, and it's 3,220 feet long. Now, how coincidental is it, Doug, that that's the same number of Skull and Bones, 322? That's how tall the bridge is. The bridge also
322 feet tall, and how long?
3,220 feet, or 3,200 feet. 3,200 feet.
Wow. Okay. All right. Wow.
I'm sorry, 322 again with a zero, 3,200. So it's in there, Skull and Bones. Now, when this program begins, is it just all in fun? Well, below the surface layer, here's what's going on, and let's just get right into it. Satan is using the New World Order and his New World Order minions and puppets to bring about his one world satanic police state demonic government. And God's going to let this happen. Now, the infrastructure of the New World Order is under construction as we speak. The big question is, how long will it take to finish all the infrastructure? I don't know, and we talked about that in the previous hour, Doug. I don't know. However, it must be acknowledged that they are working on it. And the end game is the one world government that we read in the scriptures. Now, again, I don't know how long that's going to take, but satanic people, demonic people are behind it. And what this commercial illustrates is that their hand is involved in controlling all segments of our society. They have control of our transformation. I'm sorry, just had a senior moment. Transportation. Bridges are mentioned. Sorry about that. They're in control of the transportation of America, and they're the ones in control of the bridges. They're the ones that control the direction that traffic flows, and they do it as as a maestro of a symphony. They're in control of that. Now, the next part of the commercial had the hand playing the power station. I looked and I looked and I looked. Where is that power station? Where does it belong? That's part of the Kearney Power Station on the Hackensack River of New Jersey, Doug and Joe. And I found the image. If you scroll down, you can see the picture. I have it toward the bottom. But that's what is playing the trumpet. The fingers are in control of the Kearney Power Station. And that is a subliminal, subconscious, or maybe in our face announcement that they're in charge of the power. The power is one of their instruments, and when they're finished with the instrument, they can put it away. They can put it in its suitcase. They control the power. They can turn the grid off or on. They can control the grid. They can control the source of energy for the grid. And by the way, Obama has made it very clear that he's going to shut down power plants who use coal. They have to switch to earth-friendly sources of energy and fuel. So the power is going to be under the control of the New World Order, and they're letting us know with these images right here. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're taking notes, do what you can to be able to find power, if you need to, from other sources, generators or off the grid, etc. Have that on your to-do list, because it's going to be important that when events do happen where the power's gone, it's too late after the lights are off. And, Doug, I know that from personal experience. So
yeah,
moving
you
down,
do.
Yeah. Oh, you guys too, right?
Well, not as bad as you, Nathan. I got to tell you, man, you've been through it. So
it's no fun going into the utility room where the freezer has your frozen food and there's a pool of water under the freezer. That's no fun. So
no.
And I heard those stories a lot from a lot of individuals. You know, you buy the side of a cow, you spend a month's income, you save up, and then it perishes because you don't have a generator. That's hard. So anyway, note to self. The next image in this commercial had the Guggenheim. The Guggenheim is a museum that is on the southeastern part of Central Park. It's along the little road that goes along Central Park in New York City. The Guggenheim is an upside-down. It's a Tower of Babel. It's a ziggurat. It's upside down, and the Andrew Lloyd, when he designed this thing, he designed it after the Tower of Babel. So as the hands are playing the drums on the Guggenheim, what is that telling us? And we spoke about this in the past, but I'll just mention it again. The culture is controlled by the New World Order. The culture of the United States, the culture of the entertainment world, the culture of the direction that we are taking is like a dangling carrot or a hook that is placed in the jaw of the average American, who are told what to believe. They are shown what to experience. The movies that are created by Hollywood are used to indoctrinate people to the plan of the New World Order, and we need to look no further than what seems to be the popular genre right now in the movie theaters that have to do with Orwellian after post-apocalyptic Hunger Games type movies. And there are several movies like that keep coming out, and I can't remember all of them, but they are being written from teen novels that have an Orwellian direction. So why is that taking place, Doug? Joe, why are they doing that? Are they doing that to program us and let us know to accept it? That's just the way it is? The aftermath of Stalin and Lenin taking over America? To just get over it? Well, I believe so. And what this image illustrates, when the hands are playing the drums on the Guggenheim, is that they control the direction of our entertainment in the media. And they're just letting us know. After that image was displayed, then we saw a giant foot playing a bass drum on a Pepsi-Cola sign. It's a vintage Pepsi sign, and the feet are banging on it. And when I saw that happen, I was wondering, now, what does that mean? Why did they do that? Well, I'll explain that in a moment, because I have an image to explain what that meant. And then after that, we had the giant hands moving the rail cars, the subway trains.
Yes.
You see that picture there? And I looked at that thing, Doug, and I wondered, what does it mean? And that's one of the things that I'm going to throw out to the listening audience, because I still, to this day, cannot figure out what this means. But as you're looking at that image, the giant hand is manipulating rail car in row 4, 6, and then 9. It pushes the 9 row forward. So 4, 6, 9 are appearing right there. And then the other thing that's interesting is the rail cars in front of the very front at the end of the car have a little white circle. Those circles are numbers, and if you have the ability to zoom in on that, and I wasn't able to save those numbers, but if I have a chance after the show is done, I'm going to get into Photoshop and zoom in and adjust the light settings to try to see what numbers these are. But at this point, I believe that the first 3 numbers, the first car has a 1 on it, the second one has an N, and the third car has a C. And then there are some other ones mentioned. So it's 1NC, and I'll place that after the program's done, after I do some Photoshopping to figure out what those numbers mean. But Doug and Joe, I believe that they are significant. I believe that those numbers are telling a story. They are telegraphing something that they have planned. Now, of course, NC, some people wonder, well, what does that mean? Well, right off the bat, that's is that North Carolina? Yes. Does it mean something else? Possibly. So I'm leaving that up for your consumption to play with. After that image was shown, then the giant hands appeared over Columbus Circle in New York City, and they turned Columbus Circle into a giant turntable, and it went back and forth, and it looked cool, and the music was playing, and the cars went backwards, and excuse me, it was a nice 3D animated image to let the people enjoy the animation. However, the Columbus Circle turntable, I believe, was the most profound part, in addition to the rail cars. Those 2 things were the most profound, and that's where I spent a lot of time researching. So as you scroll down the other images, the screen captures, that ends with the slogan, live for now, which is what Satan wants people to do. Live for now, because you don't need to worry about the consequences and accountability. That's the lie from Satan. So now, what does it all mean? And here's where I have been researching. As you scroll down, you see the Hackensack power plant.
Okay, Nathan, hold on just 1 second here. I've got a couple of emails, people asking me where that you're getting the images from. Folks, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, underneath Nathan's name here in about 30 seconds, you will have the direct link to the show notes page. I just want to tell you that. HomelandSecurityUS.com, right underneath Nathan's name on the right-hand side, it'll say show images. Click on that. It'll take you to what Nathan's talking about. Sorry, Nathan. Go ahead, sir.
Right. Or you can go to watchmanscry.com, and it's on the front page. It says Nathan on the Hagmann and Hagmann program show notes.
Hey, that'll work, too. Yeah, that'll work, too. Sorry about that.
So as we continue down, I have an image of the Kearney power plant in Hackensack, New Jersey. There it is. And then I found this picture, Doug. It took me several days, and this occurred back in March of this year. I looked and looked, and I wondered where that rail yard was, where that giant hand was moving the trains. And as you can see, I found the image of the real rail yard. Do you see it right there? That comes from the Corona rail yard in New York, and the real name of that rail yard, it's part of the 7-7 line. And all of the trains have the number 7 on them. Do you see that, Doug?
Yeah, I see that in Coronas and Queens, where the UNosphere is.
Yes. The 7-7 line, very interesting. Now, the 7-7 line, if you have Google Earth, and I'm going to place the link to this also in the show notes when I have a chance to finish. If you're looking on Google Earth and you're looking at the Corona rail yard where these subway trains are parked, the Corona rail yard is adjacent, right next door to where the World's Fair took place in 1964. It's right next to the huge complex, the Corona rail yard. Now, the World's Fair, if you're looking down on Google Earth, had an interesting architectural marvel that included a giant, they called it the Unosphere. What it is it's a steel globe made out of metal, and it's 12 stories tall. It's a very high globe made out of steel, right? And that was part of the big attraction in the World's Fair. It's still there. So if you're looking at Google's Earth, these trains are next to the Unosphere. And I made a note of it, and I wondered, okay, does that mean anything? You know, these rail cars next to the globe. And I was throwing out different things when I'm investigating, Doug. And you know, we do this as investigators. You throw out everything, you place it on the table, and whatever sticks you leave. If it doesn't, then you get rid of it. But I was wondering if this Corona rail yard being right next to this Unisphere had some significance about the new world government that's coming, the one world government, the new world order, because it's a giant globe right next to the rail yard. And I wondered, but I don't know, so I just left that on the table. But I find it interesting. Well, as I continued to look at the other landmarks of this commercial, then the randomness of this Unisphere was erased, and I believe it actually has a very, very profound meaning. And as we look down, but hold that thought, and let's continue down on the page to where the feet are playing the drums on the vintage Pepsi Cola billboard. I looked and looked at where this billboard is located, and lo and behold, I found it on Google Earth, and the image right below the vintage billboard. Do you see it right there on the river? The Pepsi sign is located right across the river from the UN building. So when the Pepsi Cola sign is being, the drumming of Pepsi was taking place, all the minions of the UN can look outside their window and see that Pepsi Cola sign as they're working, and Pepsi and the UN have a very close marriage. So Pepsi is sending and telegraphing a message to the UN, in other words. This is who the audience is, the United Nations, one world government. Again, the theme of the one world government is repeated over and over in this Pepsi commercial. So the Pepsi sign, in summary, is playing for the audience of the United Nations because it's right across the river. I mean, it's the line of sight is too clear. You see it there, Doug?
Oh, yeah, it's obvious. Google Images, that's correct. Yes, it's very obvious. About halfway down, folks.
Okay, so now let's look at Columbus Circle. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that do not know what Columbus Circle is, it's a part of New York City located on the southwestern tip of Central Park. It borders Central Park, and it's been in a lot of movies, and there is a lot of history to Columbus Circle. Now, Columbus Circle was built over 100 years ago to commemorate the New World, the arrival of the New World, and it was done on the 400-year anniversary of Columbus discovering America, 1492, or actually the new continent, because he was in the Caribbean. But nevertheless, it was done in 1892. It was built. So it was a 400-year anniversary. That's what it started out as, to commemorate. Now, key word, Doug and Joe, and ladies and gentlemen, the New World. The New World began to leave Europe, and for several hundred years, the New World was the Americas. And now here we are once again looking at a new world, which is no longer the Americas, but now that we've experienced the New World here geographically in the Americas, now we're going to go to the New World Order. But the Columbus Circle is a timestamp of new worlds coming and going. So I have an image. It's a vintage picture, and I have several of them. You see those, Doug, of Columbus Circle? And Columbus Circle, when it was initially built, it was a roundabout in New York City next to Central Park, and a rostral column was built, and on top of the rostral column is a statue of Columbus. Now, some people would say, well, it's an obelisk. It's not a rostral column, but if you do the research, I based on what I was able to find, they say it's a rostral column, and I believe even in Russia they have some rostral columns. Rostral columns have been a part of history, and in fact, rostral columns, if you go all the way back to the denarius, Titus is on the denarius 2,000 years ago. That's the money that was used 2,000 years ago. Titus, Emperor Titus, is on his face is on one side, and on the other side, the back side of the coin, the Roman coin, is Titus on top of a rostral column. So a rostral column is a commemorative perch or capital that signifies it's to give honor to an individual or a person to show that they are held in high esteem. And if we go back far enough to the beginnings of a rostral column, then yes, then it is associated. There's a chance it's associated with the obelisk, but I have not been able to link those two things together. So as I stated, Doug, my research is not all the way complete. So I'm admitting that right now. Nevertheless, the rostral column is in the middle of Columbus Circle. Also located on the edge of Columbus Circle, after it was built, in 1898, an event occurred in the American military where the USS Maine was destroyed. Now, that's a warship that was parked in Havana Harbor, Cuba, in 1898, and the USS Maine exploded, and a lot of sailors died. And, of course, for the people that have studied the explosion of the USS Maine, that's a can of worms, Doug, because the U.S. military investigated it, and they concluded that it was Cuba or Spain's attack on it, and as a result of that, war was declared on Spain in late 1898. And the Spanish-American War occurred that lasted 6 months, and out of the Spanish-American War, America was victorious, and America was able to get control of the Philippine Islands as well as kick Spain out of Cuba. And what it did was it gave America respect around the world that America was now a world power. It took America from being a regional power to becoming a world power, and in fact, it was the beginning steps for America to become the superpower empire that it is now. However, in order for that to happen back then, the USS Maine exploded, and now looking back in history, I believe that some people have researched that. I believe Alex Jones has researched that, and he has done research that has stated, and I don't have his research in front of me, but I believe he has stated that it was a boiler that exploded. It was an accident that happened, but it was still blamed on Spain, or maybe it was an inside rogue element that caused it to explode. Nevertheless, the end result was war. And some people would even say that the U.S. Maine exploding was a false flag event that got us into war. Well, after the Maine exploded, to commemorate the dead sailors, a memorial was built on the upper northeastern edge of Columbus Circle. And I have an image of it right there. There's a gold-plated statue on top of a very large column to commemorate the Maine exploding, and it's a memorial. It's very beautiful. It's been in a lot of movies, and I have a picture of it here on the website for people to look at. Now, for those that are asking, Nathan, so what? Why are you bringing that up? Well, here's why, Doug, and I'm going to bring all this together now. If you look at the architecture of Columbus Circle, now in 2003, 2004, New York City commissioned a remodeling project of Columbus Circle, and they placed a fountain in Columbus Circle. They brought in water, and they brought in sidewalks, and the design of Columbus Circle is very interesting. As you look at the design, I placed a GIF file, and you're looking at that, Doug? It
right, animated. Yeah, it's animated, and it's fantastic. Go ahead.
Okay, Columbus Circle, Doug and Joe, and I don't know why they did this, but I have to. It's an in-your-face, obvious. It's telegraphing that the New World Order, that the Illuminati, that the Freemasons, that the pagans, that Satanists have a role in what goes on in the world, as well as the architecture around New York City. The new architecture and the remodeling project of Columbus Circle has turned Columbus Circle into a giant triquetra. And a triquetra is a satanic pagan image symbol that has 3 petals on it and with a circle around it. And interesting, that's also found on some Bible covers, Joe and Doug. But that pagan symbol, the triquetra, for those of you that do not have the ability to see these images, Google the image of the triquetra, because I'm showing it is an image to that the pagans believe in. And here's what's interesting, Joe and Doug. The triquetra is used by those who practice tarot card reading, and they will place a cloth over a table, and they will use the tarot cards on top of the image of the triquetra. And the reason for the triquetra symbol on the cloth that they use when they're telling the future with their cards, the tarot card readers, is it divides the person's reading into three categories. There are three areas that the triquetra opens up, and if you look at the symbol, the astrological symbol, I have it right there. Doug, do you see it?
That's right. Yep.
It represents reincarnation. It represents through the process of living your life, and then the next segment of the triquetra is dying, and then the next segment of the triquetra, tongue twister there, right, is rebirth or reincarnation. So it is a cycle that is endless of life, death, and rebirth, and it goes in a circle over and over and over. Now, the pagans believe very strongly in this. Those that are members of the New Age believe in this, life, death, rebirth, and the Illuminati, the Masons, also believe in this. They believe that a person lives their life, and then there's chaos, there's destruction, and then out of chaos rises the new birth, the rebirth. So the three-part triquetra is very, very important to the Illuminati. And that's why they have placed a giant one in the middle of Columbus Circle, and Columbus, Mr. Christopher Columbus, is right smack dab in the middle of it. Now, I have other images that show that this symbol is not just a benign thing. It is used on Ouija boards. It's used on a lot of satanic elements. And in my research, I have some other images. I'm going to place them when the program's over to also explain that the triquetra is not just a benign thing. Now, if you were to scroll down to the next image, Doug, here's something that occurred in 2003, 2004 in the middle of Columbus Circle. After the Twin Towers fell, after 9/11, there was a parking garage that was on the western side of Columbus Circle that was demolished and torn down, and then a new project was built. 2002, 2003 and 4, Twin Towers were created on the western side of Columbus Circle, and I have an image of it in the background. You see it right there? Now,
I do, yeah.
Okay, those Twin Towers, and if you scroll down, you can see them real clear. Those Twin Towers are the world headquarters of CNN and Time Warner. So, and by the way, Anderson Cooper broadcast from there, and Mr. Pierce, show, now he's been canceled, Morgan, also broadcasted from those Twin Towers. Those Twin Towers went up after 9/11. Some people wondered, why in the world did they build new Twin Towers? Did you do that to mock 9/11? And they said, no, it's just cool buildings, et cetera, and they denied there was anything involved in that. But I beg to differ, because I believe that it's a very, very subtle, in-your-face reenactment of 9/11, the Twin Towers. Now, there is also another business or location of a it's a hotel that exists in the Twin Towers, and that hotel is called the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, and it's one of the most luxurious 5-star hotels in New York City as well as in the entire country. It's very, very expensive. Again, it's called the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. If you were to Google that thing, the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, now here's where the symbolism and the subtlety is, again, in our face, Joe and Doug. The Mandarin Oriental Hotel is owned by the New World Order Dynasty Keswick family. That's Keswick. And the Keswick family is in control of the Jardine Matheson Group. For those of you who are familiar with them, they're a conglomerate. And here in America, most people probably haven't heard of them, but they are a conglomerate that has been around since the mid-1800s. They are the ones that made Hong Kong prosper. They were some of the original British families that grew very, very wealthy off the backs of the slavery in Hong Kong back then, and the Chinese back then. Some of the dynasties, they call them the original Taipans, the original Hongs from way back in the 1800s. Anyway, the Keswick, Jardine, Matheson conglomerate they have their paws in the New World Order. In fact, the Keswick family is also in bed with the Rothschilds, and together they have been acquiring a lot of Asian companies. And when we hear about China buying up this company and that company, well, behind the scenes, the Keswicks and the Rothschilds and the Jardine Matheson group are part of the banking that's behind the scenes to fund and finance all of these Asian acquisitions of companies here in the world, where China's basically buying up everything in America, as well as some other BRIC nations. Brazil is buying up some American companies as well. Well, the Keswick family and the Jardine Matheson conglomerate are behind the scenes making that happen. Well, what does that have to do with these towers? These same people are, if you want to get to the very top of the satanic order of the New World Order, these are the ones that are never mentioned. These are the very, very wealthy of the world, who most people don't know about. And in the middle of Columbus Circle, the New World Order family, the Keswicks, own the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. And that is a subtle representation that China, which is inside the Twin Towers now, the rebuilt Twin Towers, now China is represented in the new Twin Towers. The wealth of China and the wealth of these New World Order Rothschild families are now represented in the rebuilding of the Twin Towers, and they are, lo and behold, also in the same building where all of the media is controlled, CNN as well as other companies, Time Warner. They give us a lot of the controlled media that steer the basic direction of America. They're the ones that are steering, as we speak, Doug, these stories of the Ebola virus. They're the ones that are steering these reports of what's happening in Missouri. And we could go on. It's coming from the media. Well, here they are located in the Twin Tower of Columbus Circle. So is that just a coincidence, or is there more to it? Well, there is something else that I discovered when I was looking at Columbus Circle in Google Earth. And if you are able to look at the last image, do you have it right there, Doug and Joe, ladies and gentlemen? If you have the last image, yep. Here is something that I find very, very interesting, and here's where this is a huge can of worms. There is so much. A book could be written about this thing. YouTube videos could be made about this. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am giving you a source of information here. Run with it. Let's expose this thing. But if you're looking from Google Images, Doug and Joe, this is a stamp from Google. In the middle, it's Columbus Circle. And if you look directly to probably 1 to 2 o'clock, you can see the USS Maine Memorial. It looks a little bit light. It's where it says Columbus Circle, the L and the E of Columbus Circle, it's right above the L and the E. That's the USS Maine monument. Now,
the shiny thing, or
image.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. If we were to look at Columbus Circle as a clock, and not just as a clock of 12 hours, but as a clock of years, this is what's very interesting. The USS Maine was built. The memorial was created, and I have it on. Let me see that I don't know if I included it. Okay, I'll do it after the program's done. I have an image to show this, but the USS Maine Memorial was dedicated in 1913. So if we were to look at the 13 on a clock, it's interesting that it's on the 13. And by the way, New World Order Illuminati Masonic number, the Maine was commissioned, the Maine Memorial, 1913. Why? Well, that's because it was done, and by the way, side note, it was the Maine Memorial was created and designed by a Freemason architect. We can see it on 13. The USS Maine event, some people would say, was a false flag event. Because of that event, we had war. Now, Columbus Circle has 3 petals to it, 3 ways to exit it, and those 3 ways exit on streets. The first one at about 4 o'clock exit on Central Park South, and then another one exits toward the It's at about 7 o'clock, and I'm not sure what road that is on Google Earth. I'll have to make note of that. And then the northern part of the Triquetra exits right into Broadway. And I'm saying that because this is another thing that I find interesting. If we were to look at this as a clock, do you guys see where I have the Twin Towers to the left of Columbus? It's to the left and at about 9 o'clock, and then I have another line to the second tower at about 11 o'clock. Do you see that, Doug and Joe?
Yeah,
so the new Twin Towers are at 9 and 11 o'clock of Columbus Circle. 9,
no
11.
Coincidence there, right? Yeah, you can, folks. You can see that. Imagine a clock at the 9 o'clock hour would be one tower, and then at the 11 o'clock would be the second tower.
When you're looking straight down.
Yep.
Now, I don't think that's a coincidence, gentlemen. That is. There's so much there. Again, now the exit of the Triquetra to the very north exits into Broadway, and that's the street right at around 11:58 of Columbus Circle, and then at smack dab 12 o'clock, it's the very edge of Broadway, and then at 12:01 till about 12:02 is another building. Do you see that black building? That is Donald Trump's International Hotel at 12:01, and in the courtyard of Donald Trump's International Hotel is another sphere. Now, when I was sharing, the Corona rail yard had a sphere from the World's Fair right next to it.
Right.
Columbus Circle has another World Sphere at approximately 12, that would be about 12:01, 12:02, give or take. There's a sphere. So this is what I am submitting right here. Now, Doug, do you see the sphere? I marked it. I put a circle around it, and I said World Sphere.
Right.
And I believe I have an image, 2 images above it, shows the sphere. If you scroll right up.
It's much like the World's Fair.
They look almost identical, don't they? Very close.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what I submit to you, gentlemen. And is it a coincidence? I don't know, but since we know that they love to play with architecture and numerology, etc., I don't think it's a coincidence. But let me now interpret what I believe we're seeing right here. When you look at 13 minutes after the hour, that was 1913, the USS Maine took us into the Spanish-American War, and America became a world power. As you go down to the first leg of the Triquetra, you have World War I. As you go around to 7 o'clock, you have World War II. Now, after that, you have 9/11, between 9 and 11 o'clock, and then the exit for the northern part of the Triquetra that exits into Broadway. Now, let's visit that for a moment. 9/11 has occurred. That's the past. We are not entirely at the arrival of the New World Order. So where are we in the clock of history? I would say we're after 9/11, but we're a little bit before the official announcement of the New World Order. So that would place us in Broadway. That would also place us with the northern exit of the Triquetra, the sidewalk that exits to the north. It says in the Bible that many are on the way that is broad that leads to destruction. The way is broad that leads to destruction. Again, that's biblical. And when we look at what's going on in the world stage, Doug and Joe, we are on the way that is broad throughout the world right now that is going to lead to destruction, meaning World War III is coming. And after the destruction occurs from the broad way, and by the way, that term Broadway can be interpreted in a lot of different layers. We have the broad way of destruction. We have the broad way that leads to death, away from God, denying Him as Savior and Lord. The broad way of living our life how we want, etc. Where we can have we can spend a lot of time on Broadway and interpret it a lot of different ways. And because of that, it does have a lot of layers. After the broad way of destruction, Doug and Joe, we're finally going to, out of the ashes, have the arrival of the New World Order. And how interesting is it that at 12:01, if you go right direct north of Columbus Circle, where Columbus's statue is, directly at 12:01 is the International Hotel created by Donald Trump. So from 9/11, the next building is international, meaning world, meaning new world. And in the courtyard of the International Hotel is that one world sphere. So as we go around the clock, the end result is going to be the one world government, and we see it at about 12:01, 12:02. So are we at the one world sphere at 12:01, 12:02 yet? No, we're not. We're in the way of the broad way of destruction. So in summary, Doug and Joe, when you look at this thing, it has a lot of information. It tells a lot of things. And when we look at 1213, where the USS Maine Memorial was, that war occurred out of a flaw, as Alex Jones would say, a false flag event of the USS Maine exploding. And then we got into war. When we look at the Twin Towers to the left and at 9/11, looking at it like a clock, that's another false flag. Out of that false flag, we're going to also, once again, repeat history, and we're going to have war, the broad way of destruction. So, again, going back to the very beginning of what I was stating, we started out with a Pepsi commercial. A giant hand turned Columbus Circle into a giant turntable, and the hand was moving it forward and backwards. So the giant hand of the Illuminati is able to control the history, America's history, forwards and backwards through their own events, through their orchestrated events. They believe that they are the maestros of history. They believe that they're the ones that are going to dictate and determine the direction of the United States based on what they decide. So when they threw out that little image that just lasted a few seconds in the Pepsi commercial, Doug, was it a benign thing? Was it just something that came and went that meant nothing? Or was it something that was profound and meant volumes? Well, again, since we don't believe in coincidence, and Satan is allowed right now to be the maestro of destruction, he is going to be allowed to be the destroyer of this world. They were telegraphing a picture of what their history is going to be. So in summary, Doug and Joe, I'm looking at this thing, and again, I don't have it complete. It's very, very ominous, but there's paganism in their symbols here. The architecture has satanic paganism that's used in the occult and Ouija boards, and we also see historical events that have come and gone. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that are the sleuths, once again, Doug and Joe, if you have Google Earth, you can look at this and then zoom in. Perhaps if someone could look at the other buildings that exist and see what roles they played throughout the 100-some-odd years of Columbus Circle's existence, there's probably other things to unravel. When I was doing my research, I wondered, well, do the pagans ever meet at Columbus Circle? Do the Satanists meet there and conduct rituals? Do the shamans meet there? And I did discover that there are groups of pagans. In fact, you can find their website. The shamans meet in Central Park, and then there's another group of gay shamans that meet in Central Park. And I don't know if they arrange to assemble in Columbus Circle and then go to Central Park where they do their rituals. But I have a feeling, Doug and Joe, that if someone were to dig, that a lot of satanic rituals have taken place in Columbus Circle, because if they created it to be what we are seeing as that symbol, the triquetra, if they created it to be one of those in such a tall order, then what is going on there? What sorts of satanic things have taken place there? So with that, I will turn it over to you and listen to your comments, but I know I'm giving a lot of information here, but I think that there's something here, Doug. I really, really do.
By the looks of it, yeah. I've got to say that there's something here, obviously, and you've done a very good job, folks. But please take your time and look at the images, because the historical clock. Now, the two buildings, Nathan, those are the Time Warner buildings, right? I mean,
yes, the AOL, Time Warner, CNN buildings, world headquarters.
Right. Okay, and then you've got Lincoln Center, which is just north of there, Interesting how that. Okay. Yeah, Broadway almost at not quite at 12 o'clock. Wow. Okay. Why there though? Why there?
Exactly,
Why?
and Doug, this is a question that I have to throw out for the people that will say, "Okay, you guys are reading too much into this," but and I could hear someone saying that. Let's be honest here, right? It sounds like quackery. I understand that. However, during the Super Bowl, which told us to prepare, where Pepsi was involved and the Illuminati was very involved with their prepare message, they gave us Columbus Circle. They're the ones that did this, and they had a giant hand controlling Columbus Circle. So because of that, it can't be dismissed.
No, you're right. They did do that. I forgot about the correlation between the Super Bowl commercial and Columbus Circle. It was their reference, not ours.
Exactly. I know I gave a lot. There's a lot to digest here. Granted, and there's a good chance you're going to get inundated with emails in the next few days. Perhaps someone out there knows, Doug. So, we can, as I get some reports, if someone has some more facts to explain this, then please contact me. I'm very open to it. Contact Doug. Let us know this. But I looked throughout the Internet. I scoured it, Doug, and I have not found any source of anyone else that has made this connection. So am I the first one to see this? I don't know. Or has it been hidden in plain sight all along? Obviously. But since they're the ones that made the reference, then I want to know what they're trying to say.
Well, I got to tell you, Nathan, I understand and am impressed, and also think you're right on to something with the time of the Columbus Circle and how that has been set up. I think there's something to that, and I think you laid it out very nicely. I'm going to have to listen to the program again to make sure I catch everything, but I think you're...
By the way, real quick, let me say this, Doug and Joe. The purpose of Columbus Circle initially, 1892, was the New World Memorial. And now here we have, again, the New World Order. It's the clock all the way around to the New World Order. And the New World is at 12:01 or 12:02. So
that's true. By the way, Nathan, I've been getting inundated with emails about your reference to when we were talking back about Ebola. And you referenced Ezekiel 5, verse 17. Okay, so I will send upon you famine and evil beasts and pestilence and blood shall pass through thee. 17, Ezekiel 5, verse 17. So, 17's quite a few of them, indeed. And I just even the Illuminati use scriptures to tell their messages. So, just as an FYI, folks. Interesting. I
gave a lot, Doug. I know.
Wow.
We were all over the place, but I had to present all this. So here's where we are.
You mentioned. Let me go back to again. You mentioned the ziggurat. When they're pointed up, they're a stairway or tower to reach the heavens. You pointed that. You're the one that said that. When upside down, then there's a spell from the heavens to earth. One is a gateway for the USA to heaven. The other is a gateway for them to earth. The same as satanic symbolism for triangles that's going up, and spells and the images, and upside down, power and energy to earth. So just kind of a little bit of info for your consideration. But you know what, Nathan, we're at the end of the program. My goodness, how this has gone by so quickly. You've done a great job. I got to tell you, fascinating as always, folks. Nathan Leal, WatchmanScry.com. Nathan Leal, WatchmanScry.com. Nathan, we got about 30 seconds. Any closing comments, my friend?
Ladies and gentlemen, let us not forget to keep the spiritual perspective part of our sight, our view, and our perspective. It's so important to do that, because if we lose sight, then we're going to be led astray.
Amen, brother. Thank you so much for your time tonight, sir.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
All right, buddy. You take care, my friend.
Bye-bye.
That'll do it for us tonight, folks. Till tomorrow. Stay safe. God bless.